was 9 when it happened. Back then, Wendy's was just fries, Frosties, and those flimsy plastic toys that broke before bedtime. I never thought it would become the place that changed the way I looked at people forever. But it didn't start there. It started with my mom and dad. They weren't the kind of parents who hired babysitters. They trusted each other and their co-workers more than strangers. Both worked full-time, and for a while in the early 2000s, they were employed by a regional environmental research department in Colorado. The department shared its building with other public offices inside a huge government-owned structure that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Yellowing paint peeled at the corners, the linoleum floors were cracked and dull, and the fluorescent lights made a low, constant hum that followed you everywhere. A Wendy's sat just a few streets away, glowing red and gold against the drab gray of that building. My dad worked in air quality, my mom in water contamination. On nights when deadlines hit and projects dragged past dinner, they'd bring me along. Fridays mostly. We'd grab Wendy's before heading back to the office for just a few hours. That Wendy's became my second home. I had my usual 6-piece nuggets, small fries, and a chocolate Frosty. The staff all knew me, the little kid with the messy hair and dinosaur backpack. Most were kind, but one man stood out. His name wasn't Tony, but that's what I'll call him. Tony wasn't a Wendy's employee. He worked night security for the building across the street. Still, he came by almost every night, grabbing food or chatting up the workers. The first few times I saw him, he looked like every other adult with a badge and a flashlight. He had one of those deep, easygoing voices that made people stop and listen. He wore too much cologne, chewed gum constantly, and smiled like it was a reflex, too quick, too wide, and he liked talking to me. "Hey, sport," he'd say, crouching down to my height. "What's the password tonight?" I'd grin and shout something ridiculous like Super Space Ninja Fries, and he'd laugh, stepping aside with a mock salute. To a 9-year-old, he seemed harmless, even fun. My mom thought he was polite, helpful. My dad, though, he never said much about Tony. He'd just tighten his jaw whenever the man came around. Then came that night. The one burned into my brain. It was pouring. Not just rain, needles of ice-cold water slashing sideways through the wind. My parents grabbed Wendy's to go and brought me inside their office. I sat in the break room, legs swinging under the chair, dipping fries into my Frosty and watching cartoons flicker on a tiny box TV. Tony showed up around 9:30, making his rounds. He waved at my parents through the doorway before turning his attention to me. "Hey, buddy, got your nuggets?" "Yeah," I said through a mouthful. He smiled. "Want to see something cool?" I looked over at Mom. She barely looked up from her files, papers spread everywhere. "Don't go far," she said absently. "Stay with Tony." I hesitated, but he was already holding the door open. "Come on," he said, that gum popping between his teeth. "It'll be fun." I grabbed my Frosty and followed him into the hallway. That was the last normal moment of that night. The corridors were dim, long stretches of beige walls and flickering bulbs. The air smelled like copier toner and cold metal. Tony's flashlight beam bounced over plaques, door handles, and bulletin boards with curling edges. The sound of my sneakers squeaking echoed like footsteps that didn't belong to me. "You ever been down to the lower levels?" Tony asked. I shook my head. "My parents said not to go too far." He chuckled softly. "Just a few minutes. I used to be a kid too, you know." I know where all the cool spots are in this dump. Something in me wanted to say no, but I didn't want to seem scared. So I followed. Each step down the stairwell clanged against the hollow metal steps. The air got colder. At the bottom, he pushed through a heavy steel door. The basement smelled of mildew, old coffee, and dust thick enough to taste. Pipes crisscrossed the ceiling, sweating condensation. "This way," he said, moving ahead with the flashlight. He flicked on a few wall switches as we went, each one revealing another stretch of concrete hallway lined with old doors marked maintenance or archive. The hum of machinery filled the silence. "Ever seen a boiler room?" he asked, glancing back at me. I shook my head. "No." "Well," he said, flashing that too wide grin, "today's your lucky day." He pushed open another door, and the sound hit first. Low, steady groans like something alive breathing in its sleep. 2 massive machines loomed in the dim light, pipes running across the ceiling like veins. Steam hissed somewhere behind the metal casing, and a faint smell of burnt dust lingered in the air. I remember standing there, Frosty melting in my hand, thinking that the whole room felt wrong. Too quiet, too still, like it was waiting for something. He told me what the machines were for. Something about heat circulation, air pressure, or maybe water flow. I can't really remember anymore. His voice started to sound like background noise, deep and slow, echoing off the concrete. Then his tone shifted. "Hey," he said suddenly, crouching a little. "Want to play a game?" I blinked up at him. "What kind of game?" He smiled, the gum shifting in his cheek. "You'll see." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, folded it carefully, his big fingers surprisingly neat. Then he flicked his wrist and the paper plane sailed down the dim hallway, landing somewhere near a janitor's closet. "Go get it," he said. "Then you throw it back, okay?" It sounded simple enough. Harmless. I laughed and ran after it, my sneakers squeaking on the floor. The paper plane had landed against the base of a gray metal door. Then, click. The sound was sharp and final, followed by the heavy thud of a door slamming behind me. "Tony?" I called. My voice bounced off the walls. "Tony?" Nothing. The lights flickered once and went out completely. The darkness was absolute. I couldn't even see the outline of my own hands. The air felt thicker, colder. My chest started to tighten. "Tony!" I screamed louder this time, still nothing. I turned toward where I thought the door had been, taking careful steps, but the floor felt uneven, unfamiliar. My Frosty slipped from my hand and splattered across the floor, the smell of chocolate sweet and sour in the stale air. I tripped over something, maybe a mop bucket or a loose pipe, and fell hard on my knees. Pain shot up my leg. "Tony!" I screamed again, my voice cracking. "Please!" The silence swallowed me. I started crying then, big heaving sobs that made it hard to breathe. I banged on walls, doors, anything I could find. My palms hurt. My throat burned. My own echoes came back at me, mocking, distorted. I kept thinking, he's coming back, but he didn't. At some point I heard footsteps, soft, distant, measured. My heart leapt. "Mom? Dad?" The steps stopped, then nothing. Just the buzz of a faraway machine and the sound of my own shivering breath. I curled up in the corner, hugging my knees, shaking so hard my teeth clattered. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Upstairs, my mom must have realized how long I'd been gone. She probably checked the break room first. Empty. My dad would have said, "He's in the bathroom," without even looking up. 10 minutes, 20, 30, then the panic hit. By 10:30, they were tearing through the building. My mom stormed into the lobby and found Tony leaning against the reception desk, sipping a soda like nothing had happened. "Where's my son?" she snapped, voice shaking. Tony blinked slow. "He was just with me." Must have wandered off. I told him to wait by the elevators. "What the hell do you mean, wandered off?" she shouted. My dad appeared right behind her, eyes hard as stone. "Where is he, Tony?" He didn't answer. They searched every hallway, every room, shouting my name over and over. The sound of their voices echoed faintly through the vents above me before fading again. I didn't even realize I'd fallen asleep until I heard my mom's voice. Real this time, closer, desperate. "Eli. Eli, where are you?" I scrambled up, sobbing. "Mom, I'm here!" I ran toward the faint glow at the end of the hallway and started pounding on the door. "I'm here, please." The door burst open and light flooded in. My mom dropped to her knees, grabbed me and pulled me against her chest. I remember how she smelled. Wet wool and Wendy's grease. She was crying so hard I could feel her whole body shaking. My dad stood behind her, breathing hard, jaw clenched tight. When he turned toward Tony, something changed in his face. I didn't hear what he said, but his fists were balled up like he was ready to break something. Tony mumbled something about me slipping away while he showed me something cool. No one bought it. The next day, Tony was reported. By the end of the week, he was fired, but that wasn't the end. 2 months later, 2 police officers showed up at our house. They had questions, mostly for my dad, since he worked in data storage. Turns out Tony had been part of a small crime ring, smuggling old government computers and selling them for parts, and sometimes for the data on them. They couldn't prove what his plan had been that night. Maybe he just wanted to scare me. Maybe he meant to come back after my parents left. Or maybe I was supposed to be a distraction. Something to keep them busy while he did something worse. I still don't know. All I know is that I never went back to that Wendy's again. And I never saw Tony after that night. People think horror is ghosts, demons, things that go bump in the dark. But sometimes it's quieter than that. It's a child alone in a basement, trying to understand why someone who used to fold paper planes is now turning off the lights and locking doors. Sometimes horror doesn't growl or scream. It wears a badge. It smells like cologne and spearmint gum. And it starts with, "Hey, sport, got your nuggets?" I don't care how easy the job looks, I told myself. Don't ever let someone drop you off without knowing where the hell you are. But at 17, that kind of thinking didn't come naturally. I was still just a kid, calloused hands, sunburned, a can-do attitude that made up for what I lacked in sense. I worked any side gig I could land after school or on weekends, flooring, drywall, auto repair, but mostly demolition. It was simple, hard, honest work. No license required, which was good, because I didn't have one. And no car either. That meant I relied on Rick. Rick was my boss, a man in his early 40s who seemed carved out of coffee and nicotine. He was one of those guys who always had a thermos in one hand and a cigarette dangling from his lips, even when he was talking. He didn't hover, didn't check in every 10 minutes. He'd drop me at a site with a list, tell me what to tear out, and come back later to make sure I hadn't wrecked anything important. We got along fine. I did what he asked, stayed quiet, worked fast. He liked that. That Saturday started like any other, only it didn't end like one. "You got enough water?" Rick asked as we pulled out of the Wendy's parking lot. It was barely 7 in the morning. The sun was just climbing over the horizon, bleaching the sky pink and gold. I was half awake, squinting through the glare while sipping what was left of my warm soda. "Yeah," I muttered, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Filled the jug before I left. "Good," he said, tapping ash out the window. "Ain't no utilities at the site." "Where is it again?" He waved a hand lazily. "Couple hours northeast, little town called Redstone. Don't worry, you'll know it when you see it." Except I didn't. I wasn't paying attention. The whole drive we talked about cars, his busted '67 Mustang project, my dream of saving enough for a beat-up Civic. I didn't notice the turns or the mile markers. Just miles of dirt road, desert scrub, and shimmering heat. By the time we pulled into a cracked lot behind an old boarded-up Wendy's, there wasn't another building in sight. The place looked forgotten. A one-story brick box with faded red trim and weeds sprouting through the drive-thru lane. The sun hit the windows just right, and for a second it looked less like a restaurant and more like a tomb. "Here's your list," Rick said, handing me a folded, grease-stained sheet. "Tear out the booths, the counter, the kitchen line, and that old walk-in cooler. Don't worry about the roof or the sign." He swung open the back of his truck and I unloaded my tools: pry bar, hammer, chisel, gloves, radio, and my gallon of water. "I'll be back by 6, he said, lighting another cigarette. "If I'm running late, Mike's crew might come by. Don't go wandering off. Ain't much out here but sun and rattlesnakes." I gave him a mock salute. "Yes, sir." He chuckled, flicked his cigarette into the dirt, and drove off, leaving a trail of dust curling behind his truck. The first few hours were easy. Hot, dusty, but manageable. The booths came out without a fight. I hauled each one through the side door, stacking them under the awning, splintered wood, cracked vinyl, the ghosts of greasy meals long gone. By noon, I'd torn out half the counter and stripped the tile from the register area. My arms ached in that good, rewarding way, sweat soaking the back of my shirt. I drank every half hour, taking long pulls from the jug, sitting for a minute on the edge of the loading ramp before getting back to work. The air was bone dry. The sun slanted through the broken windows in white stripes, turning the dust in the air into glitter. There wasn't a sound. No cars, no birds, just the occasional whisper of wind sifting through the drive-thru window. The silence had weight, the kind that presses on your ears until you start to hear your own pulse. Around 3, I moved on to the kitchen. The flat-top grill was half dismantled, its metal skin dulled with years of grease. I dragged it out with a dolly, then unbolted the grease trap. The fryers were still in place, caked brown and reeking faintly of oil gone sour, but I left them for later. My last job was the walk-in cooler. It stood in the far corner, A steel box bolted to the wall, the paint around it bubbled from moisture. It looked ancient. I pulled open the heavy latch. The hinges groaned. Inside it was empty, just a few broken bins, a single rusted shelf. But the air, it was cool, cold even. Like a breath of refrigerated air had survived the years without power. I stepped in just far enough to feel the temperature difference. My skin prickled. I glanced around once more, then started to back out. When the door swung slightly and clicked shut behind me, my stomach lurched. Shit. I pushed. It opened easily. Still, my heart had jumped hard enough that I didn't go back inside. By 4:30, I was done. The booths were stacked, the counters gone, the floor swept clean. My gloves were black with grime, and I could taste the dust in every breath. I set my tools by the entrance and sat down outside under the awning, on one of the booths that hadn't fallen apart. The air shimmered in the distance. The desert stretched forever. No sound, but the wind. I remember thinking how strange it was that something so empty could feel like it was waiting for you to notice it. I tipped the jug back and shook it. Empty. Not a drop left. I'd been waiting for over an hour, and the sun had already dipped below the ridgeline. Long, stretched-out shadows crept across the parking lot, reaching toward me like they had somewhere to be. "Where the hell is he?" I muttered. The Wendy sat silent, hollow. The air had that dead stillness that makes you feel like even the wind doesn't want to hang around. I checked my watch, 6:41 p.m. No bars on my phone, no payphone anywhere. Not a single light on the horizon. I climbed the old maintenance ladder on the side of the building and stood on the roof, scanning the land. It was endless, just desert and blacktop fading into a reddish haze. A few broken-down sheds in the distance, maybe old gas stations or storage lots, but all dark, lifeless. I felt smaller than I'd ever felt before. Back on the ground, I circled the building with my flashlight, its beam dimming every few minutes. There was nothing. Just the sound of my boots crunching gravel and the low moan of the wind through busted windows. The air felt heavier now, cooler. Desert nights don't give warnings. 1 minute it's warm, the next it's bone cold. By 8, my flannel wasn't enough. My fingers were numb, my teeth chattering. I sat under the awning, hugging myself tight, trying to ignore how quiet it was. My radio sputtered beside me. Static, then a faint burst of music, something old, warbling like a voice underwater. Then silence. Dead batteries. That's when I heard it. Thunk. I froze. It wasn't small. Not the groan of settling pipes or a falling tile. It was something heavy. Something dropped. Inside. "Rick?" My voice cracked. Nothing. I grabbed my pry bar and crept toward the open doorway. Inside was pitch black, the air colder than it should have been. Moonlight leaked through the broken ceiling tiles, washing the floor in patches of pale silver. The place felt awake. I took a few steps, holding my breath. Then came the whispering, low, wet, distorted. It was the kind of sound you don't just hear but feel, vibrating through your chest. Too soft to make out words. Too close to be wind. It came from the cooler. My gut twisted. I backed away, my boot scuffing the tile. Thud. Louder this time. That was enough. I bolted through the dining room, nearly tripping over debris, and burst out into the night. I didn't stop until I hit the back lot where my tools were piled. I crouched behind them, gripping the pry bar so tight my knuckles burned. "This isn't real," I whispered over and over. "You're tired, you're dehydrated, that's it, it's just..." But my body didn't believe it. The hair on my arms stood straight up. The air itself felt wrong, charged. Then movement, just behind the old menu board, a shape shifting in the dark. Not fast, just there. I pressed myself flat against the wall, heart hammering, staring at the drive-thru lane. I didn't breathe. The shape didn't move again, but I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel eyes on me, steady, unblinking. By 11, I was shaking uncontrollably. My breath fogged in the cold. Through the front window, I saw it. Something dark sliding from the kitchen into the hallway that led to the restrooms. Slow, deliberate, human-shaped. I stumbled backward, tripped over a pile of scrap tile, and went down hard, scraping my palms. Pain flared sharp and real. I looked up just as a blast of light blinded me. "Jesus!" I yelled, throwing up a hand. "Hey, easy." It was a voice, familiar. I blinked through tears and dust until the shape in front of me sharpened. A man with a headlamp, holding a half-eaten granola bar. Rick. "You all right, kid?" he asked, crouching beside me. I nodded shakily, trying to catch my breath. I swallowed hard. "You were supposed to be here at 6. He looked guilty, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I know. Thought Mike's crew was picking you up. He thought I was. Didn't realize till 9. Drove like hell soon as I found out." I just sat there trembling. I didn't trust my voice. "Damn, you look like you saw a ghost," he said, helping me to my feet. I brushed the dirt off, hands still shaking. I heard something in there." He frowned. "Probably rats. Or a raccoon." But I could tell he didn't believe that either. As we got in the truck, I glanced back. The Wendy sat there, quiet and dark again, as if nothing had happened. "Did you know anything about that place?" I asked softly. Rick exhaled smoke out the cracked window. "Not much. Just that it shut down years ago. Some kind of murder-suicide. Employee lost it, but that's all rumor." I didn't answer. I just watched the restaurant shrink in the rearview mirror until it vanished behind the dunes. That night stuck with me. After that, I refused to work alone, always brought a partner. Backup lights, extra batteries, extra water. I never went back to Redstone. And I never ever stepped inside another walk-in cooler without someone standing close enough to hold the door open. Still, some nights when it's quiet, too quiet, and the wind starts whispering through vents or cracks in the wall, I hear it again, that same underwater murmur curling just behind my ear, and if I close my eyes, I can still see that shadow in the hallway. Not rushing. Not creeping, just moving like it still lived there, like it was waiting. I never minded the quiet. That's what I always told people when they asked how I could stand working the night shift at a fast food joint, especially in a half-dead beach town during the off-season. To me, silence meant safety. Fewer customers, fewer problems. But I was wrong. The night that silence finally broke was the night I learned some horrors don't give you a warning. Back then, I was 25, working at a Wendy's in Eden Falls, South Carolina, a sleepy coastal town that came alive between April and August when tourists flooded the boardwalk, burned themselves pink in the sun, and ordered piles of greasy food before stumbling back to their rented condos. After Labor Day, though, the town went hollow. The air got colder, the ocean darker, and the streets emptied out. Shops closed early. The only people left were locals, retirees chasing mild winters, and the drifters. You know the kind, the ones who float from motel to motel, pay with crumpled bills, avoid eye contact, and don't always leave alone. I was broke, just trying to save enough to get out of Eden Falls for good. Working nights seemed harmless enough. It was money, and I wasn't afraid of quiet places. The shift ran from midnight to 6 a.m. I worked inside, solo most nights, while Rob, the manager, handled the drive-thru until 3. After that, he left me to lock up and clean. Technically, I wasn't alone. My friend Jackson did late-night maintenance runs for a few restaurants in the same franchise chain. Sometimes he'd swing by after his shift, grab food, and keep me company while I stocked the front and mopped the floors. It was our little ritual, something that made the long nights bearable. That night started like any other. I clocked in just before midnight, tied my apron, pulled my visor low, and started wiping down the counter. The radio in the kitchen hummed faintly, static between songs. The fryers hissed softly, the air smelling like old oil and salt. Jackson showed up around 12:30, exhausted and still wearing his oil-stained jeans and a hoodie smeared with dust. He looked half asleep. "Dude, I'm starving," he said, dropping into the booth by the window. "I got you," I said, smiling. Spicy chicken and fries, right? You know me too well. I rang it up and slid the order to the kitchen monitor, then leaned over the counter. Hey, can you grab it when it's done? I left my wallet in the office. He grinned. Man again? He laughed, grabbed his keys, and headed toward the front door. We kept the doors unlocked until 1 a.m. to catch the last of the bar traffic. A few minutes passed. I wiped down the drink station, half humming to myself. The air outside looked still through the big glass windows, just the faint glow of the streetlight reflecting off the empty parking lot. Then I heard the front door chime. Back already? I called, glancing up. But it wasn't Jackson. He stumbled inside and fell forward hard, just collapsed like his knees gave out, hitting the tile with a sound I'll never forget. His keys scattered. His arm twitched once. My brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Jackson? I whispered, rounding the counter. That's when I saw him. A man stepped out from the hallway near the restrooms. A white guy, medium build, maybe late 30s. He wore a gray hoodie with the hood up, dark jeans, and in his hand was a short, rusted steel pipe. His face was shadowed, eyes sunken, unmoving. For a second, I didn't even think to run. It was like my mind refused to register danger fast enough. Then he moved. The first hit landed just above my left eyebrow. It wasn't pain right away, just a blinding flash and the sound of my own breath catching. My knees buckled. I hit the ground, hand pressed to my face, warm blood spilling through my fingers. He swung again. Something cracked. A deep, sharp sound that echoed through my skull. My vision went white, then red, then blurry. I tried to crawl backward, but he kept coming. The world narrowed to the rhythm of my heartbeat and the ringing in my ears. Somewhere, faint, distant, I heard a voice shout, "Andrew!" Got away, man. He flagged down a cop. I didn't know who said it. I didn't even know where it came from. All I knew was the taste of iron in my mouth, the smell of salt and grease, and the realization that the silence I'd loved so much had finally turned against me. That must have been the other guy, his partner. The man with the pipe turned suddenly, shoes screeching on the tile as he bolted for the door. The sound of his footsteps echoed across the empty dining room, then faded into the night. I think I tried to call out, maybe scream for help, but all that came out was a rough, broken sound, like my throat had forgotten how to work. I could taste blood, metallic and warm, sliding down into my mouth. My body felt like it was made of sand, heavy and uncoordinated as I crawled behind the counter. My hand slipped on the tile, leaving streaks of red across the white floor. The phone was mounted by the register. It might as well have been miles away. I reached up, grabbed the receiver, and dropped it twice before finally managing to press it against my ear. My fingers were slick, trembling so hard I could barely hit the buttons. When the dial tone came, I just started yelling, "Help! I've been attacked. I'm bleeding. Please hurry." I didn't even know if the words made sense. My voice cracked halfway through. "Don't knock on the doors," I told the operator, panicking. "They might come back. Just send someone." Time didn't move right after that. Everything blurred. The next thing I remember was light, flashing red and blue, spilling through the glass windows, washing over the fryers and soda machine. 10 minutes, maybe less, and the lot was full of sirens. The ambulance came first. 2 EMTs burst through the doors, followed by a pair of cops. "Ma'am, stay still," one of the EMTs said gently. "You're safe now." I couldn't stop shaking. My body wouldn't listen. My teeth chattered even though I wasn't cold. They cut away my shirt to check for other wounds, talking softly to each other in medical shorthand. Somewhere in the haze, I asked about Jackson. My voice was small. "My friend, what about my friend?" One of the officers knelt beside me. "He's okay," he said. Flagged us down just up the road. Got lucky. Lucky. The word barely registered. It wasn't until the ER, hours later, that I realized just how lucky we'd been. The nurse stapled the wound above my eyebrow. 10 metal clicks, one after the other, while another officer sat beside my bed, notebook open. "Do you remember how many times he hit you?" he asked quietly. I tried to think, but my mind was fog. "Once, maybe twice," I whispered. He exchanged a look with the second cop. "We reviewed the security footage," he said. "It was 10. You tried to grab the pipe and get up, but he kept hitting you. You don't remember any of that?" I just stared at him. "No, I don't remember anything after the first hit." The footage didn't help much. The men had their hoodies pulled tight, heads down, no visible faces. Their car had no plates, probably stolen. They vanished before sunrise, ghosts swallowed by the empty streets of Eden Falls. The police called it a failed robbery, said maybe they panicked when Jackson escaped. But I wasn't so sure. A few weeks before the attack, I'd kicked a couple out for nodding off in a booth. They'd been high, slurring and twitching. When I asked them to leave, they'd cursed at me. "You don't know who you're messing with," the man had spat before stumbling out into the night. And a month earlier, I'd called the cops about a smell behind the building, sharp, chemical, like burning plastic. Turned out someone had been cooking meth in the alley. The cops never made an arrest, but word gets around in a small town. Maybe someone thought I'd snitched. After I got out of the hospital, I tried going back. For 2 weeks, I showed up for my shifts, forcing myself to move through the motions, sweeping, stocking, wiping down tables, pretending everything was fine, but it wasn't. Every time headlights swept across the lot, my stomach dropped. Every door chime made my pulse spike. Even the fryer timer going off made me flinch. I'd find excuses to hide in the back, pretending to check inventory or clean something that didn't need cleaning. Eventually, I told Rob I couldn't do it anymore. He didn't try to talk me out of it. Just nodded slowly and said if it were me, I'd quit too. I found another job, day shifts, less pay, but sunlight felt like armor. I could breathe again. I could sleep without waking up drenched in sweat, hearing phantom footsteps on tile, feeling cold steel pressing against my skull. Still, sometimes when I drive past a closed fast food place late at night, lights off, doors locked, parking lot empty, I feel that same knot tighten in my stomach, that memory of silence too deep and too still. People think fast food is easy work, but when you're the only one awake under buzzing fluorescent lights, with nothing but a mop, a till, and a set of keys, you learn the truth. Sometimes the worst things happen when the world is supposed to be asleep, and not every story ends with the bad guys getting caught. I never thought I'd be afraid to eat a cold burger in my own car, but that night changed that forever. Back in 2013, I was 23, trying to hold my life together with tape and caffeine. I was finishing up my degree in social work, which meant internships were next. The problem was every halfway decent placement wanted free labor. I couldn't afford unpaid. My fiancée Taylor and I were already living off dollar menu dinners and overdue bills. So when a family friend of hers, Ron, mentioned he needed help running his private transport service, I didn't hesitate. Ron's business wasn't glamorous. Modified vans and minibuses for wheelchair users, elderly clients, or anyone needing non-emergency medical transport. But it paid. Barely yet enough. He needed someone for the night shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and since I'd always been a night owl, I said yes. I took the CPR course, got my commercial license, and signed the paperwork that made me a ghost in my own life. Most nights were quiet, almost lonely. I'd shuttle someone from a care home to a hospital, sometimes strap a wheelchair onto the hydraulic lift, and then wait. Just wait. The van was comfortable enough, a small heater, reclining driver's seat, a static-filled radio, but after a few weeks, the stillness started getting under my skin. When there were no calls, I could park anywhere within a 10-mile radius. My go-to spot became a 24-hour gas station off Interstate 71, just outside a sleepy Ohio suburb called Meriden. The gas station shared a cracked asphalt lot with an old Wendy's. The kind built in the late 80s, faded red brick, buzzing yellow sign, blinds always half-drawn like it was embarrassed to still exist. The Wendy's drew the usual midnight crowd, truckers on caffeine runs, shift workers inhaling fries in silence, and people who didn't look like they were there for food. It sat next to a tiny rundown motel, 10 rooms, maybe fewer that were actually functional. Hourly rates, peeling paint, flickering neon. I never set foot inside. It looked like the kind of place where bad things went unnoticed, maybe even welcomed. For weeks, that parking lot became my unofficial headquarters. I'd park near the edge of the Wendy's lot where the lights didn't quite reach, crack the window for air, and wrap myself in a blanket while waiting for the dispatcher to call. That's when I started noticing room 8. Its blinds were always drawn, but sometimes I caught movement behind them. a tall man in a hoodie pacing. Other times a smaller figure, maybe a woman. I told myself it was drugs or sex work or both. Not my concern. Until one muggy night in late August when everything changed. It was 2:30 a.m. I'd just dropped off an elderly man from dialysis and parked in my usual spot. Half asleep. Windows cracked a couple inches. The night smelled of asphalt and warm rain. Crickets screamed from the ditch behind the Wendy's. I was drifting when I heard shouting. At first I thought it came from the radio. Then I sat up. The door to room 8 flew open. A man stumbled out, shirtless, barefoot, wild-eyed. He was bleeding from somewhere, I think. His movements were jerky, desperate. He looked terrified. "Jesus," I whispered. He ran across the lot like an animal escaping a trap, disappearing into the shadows near the dumpster. Seconds later, another man appeared, bigger, 6'3", maybe 250, wearing dark clothes. He had something in his hand, a metal bat maybe, or a pipe. From where I sat it was hard to tell, but whatever it was, it caught the light when he moved. He stopped halfway across the lot, breathing heavy, scanning the darkness. Then his eyes turned toward me. I froze. I didn't even blink. He just stood there, chest heaving, that weapon hanging loosely from his hand. Then, as if deciding something, he turned around, walked calmly back to room 8 and shut the door. I sat there for a full minute, pulse hammering, whispering to myself, "Not my business. Don't get involved. You're on the clock. This isn't your fight." But my stomach twisted. That wasn't a drug argument. That was fear. Real raw fear. And the way that big guy looked across the lot, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. Like he wanted to see who'd witnessed it. I tried to shake it off, rolled the window up and sat in silence, pretending to scroll my phone. A few minutes later, the radio crackled with static. Then a call came through. Pickup needed on the other side of town. I started the engine, headlights washing over the empty motel facade. Room 8's blinds didn't move, but I swear as I pulled away, I could still feel that man's stare following me into the dark. I finished my next trip, then another, before finally getting a break around 3 in the morning. My eyes burned and my whole body ached from sitting too long. I wanted nothing more than to park, eat, and close my eyes for 20 minutes. When I pulled back into the Wendy's lot, something was off. The space where I usually parked was covered in gravel. Large, jagged rocks scattered in a way that didn't make sense. They weren't there earlier. The lot was always clean, swept smooth by the same night wind that carried the smell of grease and stale fries from the Wendy's vent. But now it looked like someone had taken a shovel of crushed stone and dumped it right across my spot. At first I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a landscaping truck broke down, or maybe they were planning to repave. But the more I stared at it, the stranger it felt. The rocks weren't random. They formed a sort of uneven line, like a barrier, like someone didn't want me parking there anymore. So I didn't. I pulled a few spaces down, closer to the shadows, and told myself I was overthinking it. I reclined my seat, cracked the window, and tried to rest. That lasted maybe 20 minutes. A blinding flash hit my windshield. Headlights, full beam, aimed straight at me. Before I could process what was happening, a horn blared. Long, shrill, unbroken. It pierced straight through me. Then came the revving. Over and over. A deep animal sound taunting, my heart pounded. I sat up, blinking against the glare. My hand instinctively went for the gear shift, ready to throw the van into drive and confront whoever it was. But something, some small, quiet voice in the back of my mind told me not to. I couldn't see the driver. The lights were too bright, washing everything out. Just the silhouette of a car sitting there, engine growling. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to look calm even though my chest was tight enough to ache. 30 seconds passed. Maybe more. Then just as suddenly as it started, the car peeled off, tires screeching, and vanished down the road. I didn't move. I sat there shaking, staring at the empty lot until the crickets returned. Then I drove to the far side of the truck stop, parked between 2 semis, and locked every door. I kept my pepper spray in my lap until the sky turned gray. Weeks went by after that. I stopped parking near room 8. I told myself I'd imagined it, that maybe it had been some drunk kid screwing around. I stayed on the trucker side of the lot, brighter, busier, safer, or so I thought. Then came that Sunday night, 12-hour shift. No breaks, no food. By the time 1:30 rolled around, I got the return to home notification, meaning I could rest until the next trip. I felt like I'd been awake for days. Taylor had packed me leftover pasta and garlic bread, wrapped tight in foil. I could have kissed her for it. I pulled into the far end of the truck stop, quiet and empty, parked between two trailers and turned the van off. It was dark but peaceful, the hum of the freeway a few hundred feet away, the faint hiss of air brakes from a sleeping trucker nearby. I locked the passenger door, climbed into the back, and unwrapped my food. The smell hit me, warm garlic, tomato sauce, comfort. I wanted to zone out, so I opened Netflix on my phone, sat sideways with my back against the driver's door, and scrolled until something familiar popped up. As I shifted, my elbow brushed the lock button. Click, I didn't think much of it. Then, half a second later, another click. From outside. It was subtle, but it was there. Then came the clack, the sound of the driver's handle jiggling. Once. Twice. I froze, mid-breath. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. Through the narrow gap of the cracked glass, I saw movement. A shape crouched low against the door. A man. He ducked out of view. Then, to my horror, I saw him drop flat to the ground, sliding beneath the van like some kind of animal. I could still make out part of his arm, and in his hand something metallic catching the faint amber light from the trailer behind me. A knife. Every instinct screamed, "Don't move." My pulse thudded in my ears loud enough to drown everything else. I slid forward silently, inch by inch, until I reached the front seat. My fingers trembled as I locked every door, dropped the key fob once, picked it up again, and turned the ignition. The engine roared to life. I slammed the floodlights on. The sudden blast of light illuminated the asphalt beneath me, and then I saw him. He scrambled out from under the van on his stomach, fast, too fast, and took off toward the tree line behind the Wendy's. He didn't look back. Just ran, vanishing into the dark. I didn't chase him. Didn't call out. Didn't even breathe for a moment. I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached, staring at the empty patch of grass where he'd disappeared. I moved my van to a 24-hour grocery store after that. Better lighting, cameras, security guards, actual people. I never saw him again, but for months I couldn't shake the feeling that I might. I started checking under the van before every shift, once, twice, even when I was late. My boss asked once why I kept falling behind schedule. I lied and said traffic. I never told Ron. Never told Taylor the full story either. How do you even explain something like that without sounding paranoid? But sometimes, when I'm driving alone on the highway late at night, I still hear it. That clack of the handle. That soft shuffle beneath the van. And I can almost feel it, the weight of someone crawling under me in the dark, patient and practiced. Whoever he was. I know it wasn't the first time, and I doubt it was the last. I never liked taking night shifts, but bills don't give a damn about what you like. That's what I told myself every Friday night as I clocked in at the Wendy's off Route 15, just outside Jackson Ridge. The place sat like a forgotten outpost in a dying strip mall, Dollar General on one side, an empty laundromat with busted windows on the other, and behind us, nothing but cracked asphalt and waist-high weeds leading to a fenced-off drainage canal. I'd been working there a little over a year. Mid-20s, single, renting a damp basement apartment that always smelled faintly of mildew. Rent was killing me, so I picked up the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Just for a few months, I kept telling myself. Just until things get better. Wendy's technically closed to customers at midnight, but drive-thru stayed open until 1. After that, it was cleaning, stocking, and staring at the clock until sunrise. Most nights were dead quiet after 12:30. That night, October 27th, a Friday, started the same as any other. Boring. Quiet. Cold enough that the fry oil fogged the windows. We just put up those cheap Halloween decorations corporate sent us. Cartoon ghosts, pumpkins, and fake cobwebs that never stuck right. Someone had even slapped a pair of googly eyes on the Frosty machine. It was just the skeleton crew that night. Me, Lucas, Jazz, and Monica. Monica was our overnight manager. She practically lived in the back office, buried in paperwork and inventory. Lucas was in his early 30s, shy and a little strange but solid. He'd been there forever. Jazz was a high school kid, sweet, always smiling, but she couldn't go 10 minutes without checking her phone. Security wasn't required. Low crime area, corporate said, but that didn't make anyone feel better about how isolated the place was. The back lot stretched into a dark emptiness. Cracked pavement, a rusted fence, and a wooded ditch that reeked of stagnant water. Nobody went out there after dark unless they had to. Around 12:45, the last car of the night rolled through. I handed over their Frosties, forced a smile, and shut off my headset. Jazz was half dancing as she wiped tables, earbuds in. Lucas was hunched over the fryer, refilling oil. I poured myself a cup of burnt coffee, mostly to warm my hands, and slipped out the employee exit to grab my heavier jacket from the car. My old Corolla sat about 20 feet away under one of the two working lights. Those orange bulbs barely pushed back the dark. The air bit my cheeks. I could see my breath drift in small puffs as I leaned against the hood, sipping coffee. Out of habit, I lit one of my last cigarettes. I'd been trying to quit, but night shifts always found a way to drag me back. That's when I heard it. A faint metallic sound, like something brushing against wire. Ting. I froze and looked toward the fence. The dark beyond the light was thick, a black wall of brush and shadow. My first thought was raccoon. Maybe a stray cat. They slipped under the chain link sometimes, rummaging through old trash piles near the ditch. But then it came again. Ting, jingle, ting. Not from the ground this time. Higher. Somewhere along the top of the fence. I narrowed my eyes, trying to make out shapes in the dark. Nothing. The motion light above the door clicked off, leaving me half blind. I waved an arm. The sensor buzzed back to life, light flickering across the lot. That's when I heard it again. 3 sharp clinks of metal. Then silence. I straightened, heart ticking a little faster. "Hello?" I called out, my voice coming out more nervous than I wanted. No answer. Just the wind moving through the tall grass, and the faint hiss of the fryer leaking through the back door behind me. For a long moment, I stood there listening, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But the sound still rang faintly in my ears, like something had been right there, watching. The light didn't quite reach the fence, but it was enough to see there weren't any animals. No movement. Just weeds poking through cracked concrete, the kind of stillness that made your ears ring. Still, something felt wrong. The air had that tight electric tension, like the moment before lightning strikes. The hairs on my neck stood straight. I took one slow step backward toward the door. That's when the fence shook. Not a rustle, not a soft scrape. It shook, hard, metal rattling against metal, chains clanging like someone had grabbed hold and was yanking it. I froze. Then, from the dark, I saw it. Movement. A shape, tall, upright, definitely not an animal, on the other side of the fence. The figure jerked the chain link hard, like they were testing it, or trying to climb. I didn't think. I ran. Coffee splashed down my sleeve as I sprinted for the back door. My fingers slipped once on the handle before I got it open. I stumbled inside, slammed the door, hit the lock, and pressed my back against it, chest heaving. That's when the knob twisted. Once, twice. Then harder. Someone was outside, trying to open it. I clamped both hands around the knob, holding it in place. It rattled against my grip, cold metal jerking under my palms. Then silence. My pulse pounded in my ears. I grabbed the radio clipped to my belt. "Monica," I said, voice shaking. "Someone's out back trying to come through the door." There was a pause, a long one. Then her voice crackled through the headset. "You sure?" "Yes, I'm sure," I hissed. They were at the fence. I saw them. Then they ran at me, tried the door. Within seconds, Monica burst through the kitchen doors, Lucas right behind her, his apron still on. Her face looked pale under the fluorescent lights. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked, his voice low. "Yeah," I panted. "I think so. But someone was out there. I swear it." Monica frowned, already turning toward the back office. "Let's check the footage." We crowded around the tiny monitor in the office, the hum of the freezer loud in the silence. Monica rewound the footage, her expression stiff, and then I saw it. Me, standing outside, coffee cup in hand, cigarette lit. I waved at the motion light, called out into the dark, but the fence was empty, no movement, no shadow. No one running at me. My stomach dropped. Then on screen, the doorknob, the very one behind me, began to twist violently. The metal shook hard enough that even the camera jolted a bit. "Look there," I said, pointing at the screen. "That's after I came inside. That door's moving. Lucas leaned in. That's actually happening, he muttered. Monica replayed the clip slow motion. For a split second just before I bolted, the fence shuddered, barely visible but real. Could be wind, Lucas said under his breath. There wasn't any wind, I snapped before I could stop myself. My voice came out sharper than I meant. Monica looked torn between concern and corporate caution. There's no sign of entry? No alarms triggered. I'll have maintenance check it in the morning. The rest of the shift crawled by. None of us went near the back again. We stuck close to the front, lights all on, moving faster than usual. No jokes, no music. Just work in silence. When 7 finally hit, Lucas clocked out and lingered near the door as I zipped my hoodie. He looked tired, eyes darting toward the back hallway. I've been here 4 years, he said quietly. Never seen anything like that. Yeah, I said. Me either. He hesitated, thumb scratching the edge of his name tag. You know what's weird? Even in daylight, that back lot feels wrong, like someone standing just out of sight, watching. I've felt it before. Never saw it, until you did. You think I imagined it? I asked. He shook his head. No. I think you saw something we weren't supposed to. After that night, I quit smoking for good. Switched to gum. Took breaks in the lobby or found excuses to stay inside. We started taking the trash out in pairs and always before midnight. Corporate didn't care. Monica called it an employee misunderstanding. Maintenance said the fence was fine, no damage, no signs of anyone tampering with it. But 2 days later, Monica pulled me aside. She looked uneasy, voice low. That footage, she said, the one with the door handle moving. It got corrupted during the backup. Whole file's gone. I didn't know what to say. Eventually, I transferred to another Wendy's across town. Day shift, better pay. That's what I told people anyway. The truth was I just wanted to get away. From that lot. From the dark. From the thought of something standing there inches beyond the light waiting. Even now, years later, I still dream about it. The fence shaking. The handle twisting. And that shape. The one I know was there even if no one else ever saw it. I never thought much about graveyard shifts. They paid better, meant fewer customers, and let me avoid the chaos that came with daylight and crowds. Perfect for someone like me. Quiet, observant, comfortable in silence. When I got hired at a 24-hour Wendy's off Highway 21 in northern Arkansas, I figured it'd be just another job. Nothing special. But that place changed something in me. It stripped away the idea that being alone meant being safe. The Wendy's sat by itself at the edge of Russell Hill, technically still in town, but far enough that no one just happened by. Across the road was a dying car wash with one flickering bulb and a gas station that shut down at midnight. Past that, nothing but thick woods stretching forever. It was the last stop before a long, empty 30-minute drive to the next city. I worked the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, 5 nights a week. After 11, we were drive-thru only. 8 hours of hum from the fryers and buzzing fluorescent lights. Carla, my manager, stayed until midnight doing inventory, then left me alone with the headset and the keys to the kingdom. Nothing ever happened until one night it did. By then, I'd been there 6 months. 25 years old, living with my sister in a cramped duplex on Weller Street, trying to rebuild after dropping out of community college. My plan was simple. Save up, go back, finish my environmental science degree. Wendy's was just supposed to be a placeholder. Steady pay, low stress. I knew the risks of night shifts, drunk customers, sketchy regulars. But this Wendy's wasn't in a bad area. It was just too far. That's what made it feel safe. Or at least I thought so. It was a Thursday. I remember because Carla was complaining about her daughter's grades. Kids don't fear adults anymore, she'd said, shaking her head. I'd laughed and told her she sounded like someone's grandma. She told me to shut up and mop the floor. By midnight, she was gone and the place was mine. I cleaned the grill, restocked sauces, wiped every counter twice. It was always dead between midnight and 2. The last customer, a trucker, had come through just before Carla left, ordered 2 Baconators and a chocolate Frosty. After that, nothing but the soft hum of the fridge and the faint rattle of the vent hood. Around 2:15 a.m., I was behind the counter, eating cold fries and scrolling through my phone when the headset beeped. The sudden ping cut through the silence, making me jump. I slipped it on. "Hi, welcome to Wendy's. Go ahead whenever you're ready." No response. Just quiet. I waited a few seconds. "Hello?" Then I heard it, heavy breathing, male, raspy. My stomach dropped. "Sir, are you—" A voice interrupted, low and sharp. "Don't say anything. Just open the back door." For a second, I thought it was a joke. I actually looked around for a camera, half expecting to see some idiot recording a prank. My hand hovered over the switch to mute the drive-thru mic. Then the voice came again, right in my ear this time. I said, "Open the fucking door. Now." I tore the headset off and stumbled back into the prep area, heart pounding so hard it felt like I could hear it in my throat. It had to be a prank, I told myself. Maybe one of the high school kids from the day shift screwing with me. Then, bang. Something slammed against the back door. Hard. I froze. Another hit, louder. The steel flexed slightly with each blow. My body reacted before my brain could. I bolted to the office, slammed the door shut, locked it, and grabbed the phone. I called Carla, no answer. Tried 911, the line beeped, no signal. Come on, I whispered, pacing. My hands were slick with sweat. I yanked open the drawer under the desk and pulled out the company emergency radio, the one Carla always said only worked if you were close enough. God, I hoped I was close enough. I pressed the button on the radio, trying to reach the gas station manager across the road. All I got was static, then silence. No banging, no breathing through the headset. Just dead, suffocating silence. I waited, 5 minutes, maybe 10. My pulse finally slowed enough for me to move. I unlocked the office door and stepped out, my shoes whispering against the greasy tile. The kitchen looked untouched. Perfectly ordinary. Fryers still humming, lights still flickering. My phone screen glared back at me, no signal. I walked toward the back door, still convincing myself it was a stupid prank. Then I saw it, blood. Smears of it across the handle, the push bar, streaks on the concrete just outside the little square window. My stomach dropped. I stumbled backward as the knob rattled. Someone was on the other side, then I froze. He wasn't outside. He was inside. He must have climbed through the drive-thru window. I'd left it cracked open after wiping the counter. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, wearing a filthy white shirt drenched in blood. One shoe missing. His skin glistened with sweat, his hair matted to his forehead. He was bleeding from his arm, his leg, a gash above one eyebrow. His hands shook, and in one of them was a small black pistol. "Get down," he said, voice calm, too calm. I didn't move fast enough. "Get down." He roared, eyes wild now. I dropped instantly, knees hitting the slick floor, hands raised. The air stank of metal, sweat, roadkill, and blood. "I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I need your phone, your wallet, your keys." "That's it. Take it," I stammered. "Please. Just take it." He moved fast, snatched my phone from my pocket, my keys from the hook, my wallet from under the register. Then his eyes landed on the shelf beside the grill. The duct tape. We used it for sealing open sauce boxes. He grabbed it and looked at me. "Hands behind your back." I hesitated. "Don't make me do something I don't want to do," he warned, voice low and shaking. I obeyed. He wrapped my wrists first, too tight, then my ankles. The tape pinched skin and dug into hair. I could barely breathe. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again. I need a ride. That's all. I'm not going to hurt you." And then, just like that, he was gone. I heard the jingle of my keys, the slam of the back door, and the roar of my truck's engine fading into the night. Then nothing. I lay there shaking, cheek pressed to the cold tile. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The duct tape started to peel where the grease had loosened it. I worked one hand free, then the other. I crawled to the front counter and grabbed the phone by the register. Still no signal. I stumbled into the manager's office and used the old landline, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. A woman's voice came on. 911, what's your emergency? I tried to speak, but halfway through explaining, my voice cracked. I started sobbing. She told me to stay calm. That help was coming. Police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 cruisers, lights strobing against the empty parking lot. They went in, guns drawn, cleared every inch of the place, nothing. An ambulance checked me over, no real injuries, just bruises and shock. By noon, detectives told me they'd caught him in Hardelow about 40 miles east. He'd crashed my truck into a ditch near a pawn shop and tried to sell my phone, bleeding all over the counter. A customer called it in. Turns out he'd escaped from a prison transport 3 days earlier. Violent offender, prior armed robbery and assault charges. He'd been on the run, barefoot, injured, desperate. They told me I was lucky, that he'd killed a gas station clerk 2 towns over during his escape. That maybe he didn't shoot me because he was already hurt, or maybe he'd just run out of will to kill. I quit Wendy's a week later. Never went back, not even for my last check. Had it mailed. I still work nights, but never alone. And I don't play my DS anymore. Can't stand the sound of those old games. Brings it all back. I went to therapy for a while. Still go sometimes. I think about that night more than I'd like to admit. What might have happened if I'd fought back, or if he'd been just a little more alert. Or if the gun had gone off by accident. But mostly, I think about how quiet it was. How before everything fell apart, the only sound in that entire building was the soft ping of the drive-thru headset. And how out there, in the dark, on a forgotten stretch of highway, there wasn't a single soul around to hear me scream. I never thought fast food would almost get me killed. It sounds ridiculous now, people even laugh when I say it, but I swear I'm not joking. For a while, I worked the overnight shift at this Wendy's-style joint off Highway 52 in rural Indiana. One of those half-forgotten buildings that corporates seemed to abandon years ago. Cracked tiles, flickering bulbs, duct tape on the soda machine. The kind of place locals stumbled into after too many drinks or when they just needed something greasy to soak up the night. My name's Mallory Jensen. Back then I was 26, juggling community college during the week and weekend graveyard shifts to keep up with rent and my mountain of student loans. On Fridays and Saturdays, it was usually just me and whatever prep cook they stuck with me. Usually some tired high school kid who clocked out by 2 a.m., leaving me alone until close at 6. After 8 months, I was used to the weird rhythm of those hours. The raccoons in the dumpster felt more like co-workers than half the staff. Sometimes you'd get tweakers at the drive-thru, or lonely drunks rambling about ex-wives over soggy fries. Nothing shocked me anymore. Until that one night. It was a Saturday in late October. Not Halloween, not even close, but there was something strange in the air. Like the weather couldn't decide if it wanted to stay fall or dive straight into winter. A dry wind kept nudging the sign out front, making it creak like a rusty swing set. I was working with Riley that night, a 17-year-old who wore one AirPod the entire shift and spoke mostly in grunts. By 1:50, the fryers were scrubbed, floors mopped, and Riley had clocked out with a half-hearted later. By 2:15, I was officially alone. I locked the front doors, flipped the drive-thru to night mode, and settled at the counter with a Diet Coke and the laminated cleaning checklist I was fully planning to ignore for another 20 minutes. I was running on fumes, had been up since 9 that morning for a group project, and my body felt heavy in that way that makes the world blur around the edges. I just leaned back, eyes closing for a second when the doorbell chimed. Not the drive-thru headset, the front door. Now this place had one of those ancient buzzer systems. Every time the front doors opened, it let out this sharp, high-pitched ding that could wake the dead. Thing was, the doors were locked. I'd locked them myself. Double-checked after Riley left. The buzzer went off again. My heart gave a dull, uneasy thud as I stood and rounded the counter. The dining room was empty. No one outside, no movement in the parking lot. I stared at the glass doors for a few seconds, then told myself it was probably the wind. The sensors were ancient. Hell, the register still thought we sold apple pies we'd discontinued in 2022. I laughed it off, trying to shake the weird tension creeping up my spine. Sleep deprivation does weird things. Then, ding. Another one. And this time I saw it, a shadow sliding across the far window. My stomach dropped. I hurried toward the glass, scanning the lot. Across the street, under a flickering street lamp, sat a car I didn't recognize. Old, boxy, half up on the sidewalk like whoever parked it didn't give a damn. The paint looked dull and dirty, maybe gray or brown under the weak light. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. Didn't even think about it, just acted on instinct. I zoomed in. The driver's seat was reclined, and for a second I thought it was empty, until the shape inside moved. Someone sat up. He opened the car door. And then he just stared at me, directly at me. I stumbled back from the window so fast I nearly tripped over the mop bucket. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking the air. My hands were clammy. My breath came shallow and uneven. I went back to the counter, trying to calm down, trying to tell myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting. But that's when I looked at the stool beside me, empty except in my mind where I always imagined Gretchen sitting. Gretchen wasn't a customer, not really. She was 78, a retired nurse with late-stage dementia who wandered in from the assisted living home down the road at least once a week. Usually one of their aides came to collect her within an hour. But sometimes, like that night, she slipped through the cracks. She'd come in earlier, around 11, shuffling through the door in her pink cardigan and orthopedic shoes, clutching a little purse and a coloring book. I'd called the facility, and they'd promised to send someone shortly, which usually meant whenever we remember. So I'd poured her a cup of black coffee, on the house, and she'd sat in her usual booth near the window, humming softly as she filled in sunflowers with green instead of yellow. Her name was Gretchen. Now, sitting beside her again, my nerves still raw, I could feel her watching me. She looked up from her coloring book, those watery blue eyes suddenly clear, focused in a way they rarely were. "What did the man want, dearie?" she asked. It hit me like a punch. "What man?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She pointed a trembling hand toward the door. "The one who rang. He's been here before, hasn't he?" My mouth went dry. "What are you talking about, Gretchen?" But before she could answer, the drive-thru headset crackled to life. "Hey," a man's voice said, low and gravelly. "You open?" Relief washed through me, finally, something normal. I grabbed the headset. "Yeah, we're open. Go ahead with your order." Silence. I frowned. "Hello?" A pause. Then laughter. Low male, harsh. It started as a chuckle and turned into something ragged and wet, like someone choking on their own amusement. Then the line went dead. My stomach turned to ice. I walked to the drive-thru window and peered out. The old car was still across the street under the flickering light. Movement caught my eye. Russell, the night janitor from the gas station next door, was pushing a trash cart across the lot toward the dumpsters. I banged on the glass. He looked over, eyebrows raised. I motioned for him to come to the door. When he reached it, I cracked it open just an inch. "Did you see that car?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, been there a while. Weird dude sitting in it, I think. Saw him walking behind your building a few minutes ago." I swallowed hard. "Can you stay close for a bit?" Russell hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Sure. I'll do a couple rounds around the lot. Thanks." I locked the door behind him and turned back, toward the dining area, only to freeze. Someone else was there. Charlie. He was another resident from Gretchen's facility, a quiet old man, who used to be a painter before the Alzheimer's took over. He wasn't supposed to be here, but there he was, slowly moving between the tables, a clean paintbrush in his hand, swiping at the air like he was painting something only he could see. "Charlie?" I said softly. He turned his head just enough for the light to catch his face. "Don't answer the door alone," he murmured. "He might hurt you." The hairs on my arms stood up. "Charlie, why did you say that?" He smiled faintly, eyes distant. "The man told me." Before I could respond, movement flickered at the edge of the side window. A man stepped out of the shadows. He was tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes and a cracked, dry mouth. His hoodie was torn, jeans smeared with something dark. He stopped right outside the glass and looked directly at me. Not through me. At me. His face didn't move. No anger, no curiosity, just that dead, empty stare. I screamed. He bolted into the dark. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone, dialing 911. The dispatcher kept me on the line until 2 officers showed up. Familiar faces, regulars who ordered black coffee and breakfast burritos every weekend. They swept the parking lot, checked the doors, then spent a long time talking to Russell, who was pacing near the dumpsters, rubbing his neck. After about 45 minutes, one of the officers came back inside. There was a break-in 3 blocks from here, he said. A woman was assaulted by an intruder. Ransacked her bathroom cabinet looking for narcotics. She's alive but pretty shaken. He looked at me seriously. Your locks and alarm system probably saved your life tonight. I just nodded, staring past him at Charlie. He was humming softly again, painting invisible flowers across the window pane. They never caught the guy. Or if they did, nobody told me. A few days later, management installed a new alarm system and more cameras, but they still refused to hire an extra overnight worker. I quit a week later. I couldn't stop thinking about that man's eyes, or how 2 people with severe dementia, people who barely remembered their own names some nights, somehow knew he was outside before I did. Coincidence? Maybe. But I still keep that photo of the car on my phone, just in case. And sometimes when I drive past that old restaurant, I swear I feel it again. Someone watching from the dark, from the parking lot, from just beyond those locked glass doors. Idle hands, her aunt used to say, are the devil's playground. Cassie never really believed in all that until the night it started to make sense. It had been exactly 3 months since she'd started working at the Wendy's off Highway 92 in Elridge, Georgia, a nowhere town tucked between gas stations and pine woods. She remembered the date because the job was never supposed to last this long. Just a stopgap while she figured out what came next. Maybe community college, maybe saving enough to move out of her aunt's place. Anything that didn't leave her smelling like fryer oil and sweat every night. Fridays were usually chaos. Kids after football games. Couples in pickup trucks, drunk guys laughing too loud. But that night felt off, too quiet. Maybe the storm warning kept people home. The rain had come and gone before 6, leaving the pavement slick and the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and oil. The fluorescent lights inside made everything look pale and tired. Cassie didn't mind the slower shifts. Less noise, fewer fake smiles. She was polite to customers, but she wasn't one for small talk. Most of the people in Elridge weren't exactly friends waiting to happen. It was 8:45 p.m. when he walked in. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about him. Mid to late 20s, gray hoodie, jeans, scruffy beard. He could have been someone finishing a shift at the mechanics or someone killing time before heading home. His hands were buried in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, scanning the place like he wasn't sure if he even wanted food. Cassie straightened behind the counter. "Hey there. Welcome to Wendy's. Ready to order?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the menu behind her, lips pressed together. When his gaze dropped back to her face, something in it made her stomach tense. His eyes weren't wide or angry, just still. Too still. "Yeah," he finally said. His voice was low, flat. "What's the cheapest thing you got?" "You can do the 4-for-4 meal," she replied, trying to sound cheerful. Junior cheeseburger, nuggets, fries, and a drink. He nodded slowly and pulled out a worn leather wallet, his fingers trembling slightly. "You work here long?" he asked, digging out some crumpled bills. "A few months," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "You like it?" Cassie shrugged. "It's all right." He handed her a 5 and she started punching the order in. Then, almost casually, he said, "You look like someone who'd be doing more than this." Her smile came automatically, but it didn't reach her eyes. "A lot of us do," she said. He stared at her name tag. "Cassie," he repeated, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly. "Pretty name." She nodded once, pretending not to notice the way her skin prickled. It was a harmless comment. Technically, but something about the way he said it, soft and deliberate, made her feel watched. "Your order'll be ready in just a minute," she said quickly, sliding his change across the counter. He stepped aside but didn't sit. He stood by the napkin station, hands in his pockets again, staring out the window. Cassie could still feel him watching her. Every time she turned toward the kitchen, her shoulders tightened. Devin, her co-worker on sandwich prep, leaned through the pass window. "That guy's creeping hard," he whispered. "You noticed too?" She murmured back. "Yeah? You want me to hand him his food instead?" She shook her head. "Nah, it's fine. I'll just be quick." When the order was ready, she slid it across the counter without looking up. He didn't thank her. Just grabbed the bag, filled his drink slowly at the fountain, then sat down at one of the booths, directly facing the counter. There were at least a dozen empty seats scattered around the place, but he chose that one. Cassie tried to ignore it, but every time she glanced up, his eyes were there, sometimes head-on, sometimes from the side like he was pretending not to look. He ate slow, painfully slow. By 9:25, Devon couldn't take it anymore. "You want me to say something? Seriously, he hasn't stopped looking at you." "I'll be fine," she said, forcing a smile. "He'll probably leave soon." "You say that now," Devon muttered. "Just don't go out to your car alone." She laughed softly, trying to shake it off, but the sound felt hollow in her throat. The man was now twirling a single fry between his fingers, staring at nothing. Her shift ended at 10. She counted the minutes like she used to count the seconds between thunder and lightning as a kid. By 9:58, she was done pretending. She slipped into the back to clock out. Her bag sat on the break room table, a few grease stains marking the canvas. She unzipped it and checked for her keys. Still there. Her pepper spray was clipped to her lanyard right where she'd left it. For some reason, she made sure it was facing the right way, finger already resting on the trigger. When Cassie came back to the front, the man was gone. The empty booth where he'd been sitting looked almost too quiet, his crumpled napkins and half-empty cup still there, proof he'd really been real. Her stomach loosened a little, like a knot finally coming undone. "He finally left," she said, forcing a small laugh. "Yeah," Devon replied, wiping down the counter with slow, circular motions. "About 5 minutes ago. Didn't say a word, just walked out." Cassie nodded, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "All right, I'm heading out." Devon looked up, hesitating. "You want me to watch from the door, just in case?" Cassie almost said no. It felt silly, dramatic even, but something deep in her gut twisted in warning, and instead she nodded. "Yeah, I'd appreciate that." She pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the humid Georgia night. The air smelled like wet pavement and leftover grease. The parking lot was mostly empty now. Just her old Toyota sitting beneath the second light post, its faded red paint dim under the buzzing fluorescent bulb. Crickets filled the silence between distant hums of passing cars. She was halfway across the lot when she noticed movement near the dumpster. A shadow, then the shape of a man, still watching. Her breath caught. The figure stepped forward into the glow of the light. The gray hoodie, the beard, the same man. Her heartbeat slammed in her ears. Cassie turned fast, retracing her steps toward the restaurant doors. But his voice cut through the still air. "Hey!" She froze. He took a step closer. "You got a minute?" "No," she said sharply. Her voice shook despite her effort to steady it. "I'm off the clock." He kept walking toward her, hands clenched at his sides. "I just want to talk. You seem like someone who'd understand me." Cassie's fingers tightened around her pepper spray. "Stay back." The doors burst open behind her and Devon's voice carried across the lot. "Yo, man, back off." The man stopped mid-step, head snapping toward the sound. For a second, no one moved. Then he scoffed, turned, and walked away, slowly at first, then disappearing into the dark beyond the dumpsters. No car, no ride, just gone. Cassie's hands trembled as she unlocked her door and got inside. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale and wide-eyed, her breath fogging the glass. She didn't sleep that night. Over the next few days, she convinced herself he was just some unstable guy. Creepy, sure, but maybe harmless. She didn't tell her aunt. What could she even say? That some stranger had stared too long, said her name like it meant something. It sounded paranoid out loud. Then the calls started. Blocked numbers. No caller ID. The first time she answered out of habit, just quiet breathing on the line. The second time, the same thing. The third time, a voice whispered, soft and deliberate, "You're always smiling." I like that. Her blood went cold. She hung up and blocked every unknown number, but it didn't matter. They kept coming. At work, she found herself glancing toward the windows every few minutes. Every shadow in the parking lot felt like a shape watching her. She asked her manager if the outside cameras kept footage. They didn't. The system only recorded the registers. After that, she started parking directly under the light in front of the door. Devon would walk her out most nights, and she'd pretend it didn't bother her as much as it did. 2 weeks passed. Then, one night after closing, she found it, something tucked under her windshield wiper. A small lined piece of notebook paper. 4 words in messy black ink. You can't avoid me. Her knees nearly gave out. She showed the note to the police the next morning. This time they didn't brush her off. They filed a report and promised to keep an eye on the place. A patrol car started circling near closing time. For a while it helped. The call stopped. No more notes. No shadows lingering in the lot. Cassie tried to breathe again to believe it was over. Then last Friday came. She had the weekend off, her first in weeks, and decided to run a few errands for her aunt. The home Max by the highway was nearly empty, the aisles echoing faintly with pop music from overhead speakers. She was halfway down the power tools aisle when she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Her stomach turned to ice. She looked up and froze. It was him. The same hoodie, the same eyes. A different store, different town, but the same man. He didn't speak at first, just smiled. "You thought you could forget me," he said quietly. Her throat went dry. She backed up a step. "I missed that smile," he murmured. "You shouldn't have run last time." Cassie's voice came out louder than she meant. "I don't know you. Stay away from me," it echoed through the aisle. Shoppers turned. A store employee hurried over. The man hesitated, just long enough for fear to flicker in his eyes, then bolted, vanishing between aisles. Cassie stood trembling, unable to stop shaking. Her legs felt hollow. The police arrived minutes later. This time they reviewed the security footage. They took her statement seriously. There was an official investigation now, a detective assigned to her case. That was 4 days ago. Cassie hasn't gone back to work since. She's staying with a friend out of town while her aunt installs a security system. She checks every lock twice before bed. She jumps at every knock, every buzz of her phone, every unfamiliar face on the street. Because some men don't just ask for your number. Some don't just ask for your time. Some ask for you, in pieces, 1 minute at a time. And sometimes they don't stop asking even after you say no. I used to think night shifts were boring. That's what I always tell people when they ask what happened, because it's true. For the most part, they were. Nights at the Wendy's inside the Highway Travel Plaza were quiet. Sometimes a little too quiet, but mostly just dull. Especially after the dinner rush faded, the truckers gone, the families back on the road, and the dining room turned into this hollow, fluorescent box echoing with the hum of the soda machine. My name's Jenna Clark. I was 26 when it happened. I lived in Jasper Hollow, Indiana. Not much of a town, more like a cluster of buildings orbiting a gas station and a truck stop. We had a worn-down motel, a convenience store, and the Wendy's where I worked 5, sometimes 6 nights a week. Rent was always a week late, and my Toyota Corolla was practically more rust than car. But I was keeping my head above water. Barely. I'd been doing the night shift for a year straight. My coworker Lacey and I had a decent rhythm going. She was 20, always glued to her phone, barely looked up from TikTok, but she was sweet in a distracted sort of way. I didn't mind her. We also had Deputy Carl Henson, an off-duty state trooper who parked his cruiser in the lot most nights. He'd come in for coffee, chat a bit, sometimes linger for an hour just scrolling through his phone. It helped, knowing someone with a badge and a gun was close by. October 18th, Wednesday. That night started like any other. Cold wind scraping dead leaves across the parking lot. Fryer grease clinging to my hoodie like a second skin. Lacey was running late, and I was already mopping the floor when the last few customers left. Through the big window, I could see Carl's cruiser parked near the gas station, headlights off. By 11:15 p.m., the place was dead. The kind of dead where even the buzz from the soda machine sounds too loud. I was wiping the counter when the bell over the front door chimed. Ding. I looked up and froze. A man stood there, tall, maybe 6'2", brown hair plastered to his forehead. He wore a gray t-shirt and jeans that looked wet. My first thought was that he'd spilled something. Maybe gotten caught in the rain, but when he stepped closer under the light, I realized he was soaked in blood. Head to toe. For a second, my brain refused to register it. It was too much red, too thick. His shirt clung to his chest like it had been painted on, and his jeans were stiff, dark, heavy. Then I saw it, the faint, steady drip from his left hand onto the tile. Drip. Drip. He looked at me with this empty stare, hollow and glassy, and said, "Do you got a sandwich for me?" I blinked, my voice catching in my throat. Sorry, what?" He pointed slightly at the menu board above me. "A sandwich," he said again, flat and distant. "Like a Baconator or something." I just stared. For a split second, I thought maybe it was a prank. Maybe he was some YouTuber pulling a Halloween stunt early. But then I caught the smell, iron and salt and something else, something raw. And I knew it wasn't fake. He wasn't playing, he was bleeding. Or worse, whatever had happened, it wasn't over yet. I forced my voice to sound calm, casual. "Sure," I said softly. "One Baconator coming right up." Inside, my pulse was thrashing, a drum in my ears. I turned to the grill, hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the spatula. My throat was dry, every sound amplified. The hiss of oil, the hum of the freezer, the faint squeak of my shoes on tile. I glanced toward the back. Lacey had finally clocked in. She was sitting on a stool, earbuds in, scrolling her phone, oblivious. I mouthed, "Help me." She didn't look up. I tried again, louder this time, forcing a brightness I didn't feel. "Hey, Lacey," I called, pretending to check the lettuce bin. "We're almost out of lettuce. Can you grab some from the walk-in?" She half looked up, confused, one earbud dangling. Yeah, okay." I shook my head quickly, trying to sound casual but loud enough for the man to hear. "No, not that one, the extra bin. In the cooler, in the back." She frowned, but then she saw my face, my eyes. I must have looked terrified because her expression changed instantly. She nodded, slowly setting her phone down before heading toward the back door. I turned back toward the counter, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The man was still staring at the menu board, swaying slightly, blood still dripping softly onto the floor. Something must have clicked, because Lacey's face drained of color. She stood up slowly, gave me one last look, and slipped out of sight toward the walk-in cooler. I kept my eyes on the man, pretending to focus on the sandwich in front of me. 2 minutes passed. Felt like 20. The air was thick with fryer grease and the copper tang of blood. He was still at the counter, swaying slightly, eyes fixed on my hands as I spread mayonnaise, layered bacon, and pressed the bun down like this was any other order. My stomach was twisting so tight it hurt. "You okay, sir?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "You're bleeding." He blinked slowly like he hadn't processed the words. "It's not mine," he said flatly. I froze, the mustard bottle hovering midair. "What?" "I don't think it's mine," he mumbled, voice breaking at the edges. "I didn't mean to." He rubbed his temple with a trembling hand, smearing fresh blood across his face. His expression flickered, confusion, guilt, something hollow behind his eyes, like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare he didn't remember starting. That's when the front door chimed again. Ding. Carl stepped inside. I almost cried from relief. He didn't storm in or shout, didn't even rest his hand on his holster. He walked in casual, smart, deliberate. He must have seen the blood from the doorway. "Evening," he said, voice easy, calm as a breeze. "How's it going tonight?" The man didn't turn. He just stood there, still swaying, like his body couldn't decide if it wanted to fall or run. I swallowed and slid the sandwich across the counter. "Baconator for you, sir." He reached for it with a trembling hand. His sleeve slipped down as he moved, revealing a deep gash along his forearm, raw and slick, blood dripping down in slow rivulets. Carl took a slow step forward. "You hurt, buddy?" The man turned toward him then slowly, his eyes suddenly sharp with recognition or fear. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. Carl didn't flinch. He just kept moving closer, steady, the way you approach a cornered dog. "I bet you didn't," he said softly. "Why don't you sit down, huh? We'll get you looked at." The man started backing away, his hand twitching near his waist. Then he bolted. Carl moved in an instant. He grabbed the man's shoulder, spun him around just as the guy lunged. The sandwich hit the floor with a wet slap. I heard a short gasp, then chaos, metal clattering, a flash of silver, something small and fast like a pocket knife catching the light. Carl's arm came down hard. The man hit the tile, the struggle short but brutal. A shout, a grunt, the sound of flesh meeting floor. Then silence except for the ragged breathing. Lacey screamed from the doorway. I hadn't even realized she was back until that moment. It was over in seconds. 10, maybe less. The man was cuffed face down, chest heaving, muttering through choked sobs. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. By the time the sirens arrived, I was shaking so hard I couldn't hold my coffee. Paramedics, state troopers, investigators, bright lights filling the restaurant, boots squeaking across the tile. Carl gave his statement first, then came to check on me in the back room. My hands were trembling so badly I kept spilling the coffee he handed me. It was stone cold, but I didn't care. He told me what they'd found. The man wasn't just injured, he'd stabbed someone. Killed him. A guy at the motel just down the highway. Said the man claimed it was self-defense, that the other guy tried to rob him. But the crime scene told a different story. Blood spatter everywhere. Multiple stab wounds. Too many for defense. Too close. Too personal. Carl said he'd probably gone into shock, maybe even dissociated. Drove from the motel covered in blood, fueled up his car, and walked straight into Wendy's for a sandwich like it was the most normal thing in the world. He didn't even realize how badly he was bleeding. I quit 2 weeks later. It wasn't right away. I tried to tough it out. But every time that doorbell chimed, my heart jumped into my throat. Every time a man walked in wearing a hood, I saw that same glazed stare and the blood that never seemed to dry. Corporate sent a safety trainer. Management handed out little panic buttons the size of car keys. Just in case, they said. But it didn't help. Not really. By spring, I packed up and left Jasper Hollow. Moved 2 towns over. Got a job at the library. Day shifts only. Quiet, steady, safe. And yet even now, years later, every time I drive past a Wendy's or smell bacon grease hissing on a skillet, something inside me clenches. I see that man standing there under the harsh fluorescent light, his voice low and lost, staring up at the menu board like he was choosing between sins, and I still hear him, that same broken whisper as they dragged him out in cuffs, blood on his hands and floor. I didn't mean to. I was 21 when it happened, still in that messy stage between optimism and exhaustion. It was 2021, the height of COVID's strange, suffocating uncertainty. Jobs were disappearing faster than they opened, and everyone moved like they were made of glass, fragile, careful, pretending not to be scared. When I landed a position at a Wendy's just off the highway in a sleepy Florida town called Brookwell, I didn't care that it was minimum wage and smelled like fryer oil. It was my first real job, my first uniform, my first paycheck. Back then, I was crashing on my sister Cassie's couch. She was 26, overworked, and always smelled faintly like burnt coffee from her 2 jobs. She barely slept, but she didn't complain about me staying, at least not out loud. My ex had kicked me out halfway through lockdown, and Cassie had simply said, "You can stay here till you figure it out." No questions. No lectures. We were both just trying to stay afloat. Brookwell wasn't much. One of those off-the-exit towns that tourists never stopped in unless they needed gas. A few strip malls, some sagging neighborhoods, a rundown movie theater, and a cluster of fast food chains clinging to the highway like barnacles. Our Wendy's was one of the cleaner ones. Bright red booths, spotless tiles, and a huge front window that caught the late sun. I worked the drive-thru and front register depending on the shift. We closed at 10 p.m. and I usually worked from 3 to close. Mel, our manager, was a short, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who never smiled unless corporate showed up. Her voice could cut through an industrial mixer, but she ran things tight and fair. I liked that. You knew where you stood with Mel. Most nights it was just me, a quiet line cook named Rye, 20, baby-faced, shy, and maybe a part-timer who'd clock out early and vanish before sunset. I didn't mind the solitude. There was something comforting about closing up, headphones in, mop in hand, the world outside dark and still. The fryers hissed like white noise. The air smelled of salt and bleach, and for a few hours everything made sense. The night it happened was one of my last shifts there. I think about it too often. It was a Thursday evening, warm, humid, the kind of Florida winter that feels fake. I clocked in at 2:57 p.m. sharp, tied my apron and pulled my hair into a bun. Andrea, who worked the morning rush, was already halfway out the door. She looked drained, her visor crooked, her mascara smudged. "Good luck," she muttered, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "Some lady called earlier, real piece of work." Pissed that we don't do takeout for the bacon maple chicken thing. Said I was lying to her. I laughed. People are weirdly passionate about chicken. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, well, if she shows up, she's yours now. The first few hours dragged. A handful of drive-thru orders, one dine-in family, and a couple of truckers who just wanted coffee. Around 4:10, I noticed an old tan Ford pulling into the lot. Crooked, like the driver didn't care. The doors opened and 3 people stepped out. 2 men and a woman, all mid to late 30s. The woman led the way. She was tall, slim, with bleached blonde hair and oversized sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. Her lipstick was a too bright red, already smudging in the humidity. The men followed behind, one heavy-set with a beard, the other wiry, both wearing faded jeans and scuffed boots. They looked like they'd stepped straight out of a pawn shop parking lot. When they walked in, the air in the lobby seemed to tighten. The woman's perfume hit first, sweet, chemical, and heavy. She scanned the room before locking eyes on me, her lips curling into a sugary smile. "You the one I talked to about the sandwich?" she asked, voice honey-thick but with an edge I couldn't place. I nodded politely. That was probably me. "You still want to dine in?" "Yes," she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Since you guys won't let me take it out." Then her tone softened like she caught herself. "No big deal, sweetie. You're just doing your job." She ordered 2 maple bacons, 1 regular chicken sandwich, and 3 drinks. I noticed she had a red binder tucked under her arm, a black pen clipped to it. It stood out, too formal for a late lunch at a Wendy's. Maybe she was a realtor. A lot of people lately had been talking about buying property around Brookwell. Cheap land, open space, that kind of thing. After they sat near the front window, I joined Rye at the prep station. "She's got a weird vibe," I said under my breath. "Like trying too hard to be nice." Rye shrugged, dropping the chicken patties into the fryer. "People act extra nice when they know they were jerks before." "Guilt thing, maybe?" "Yeah," I said, but the thought didn't stick. Something about her smile felt practiced. When the food was ready, I grabbed the tray and brought it over to their table. The woman looked up, flashing that same too-sweet grin. "You live around here?" she asked casually. I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. Yeah, nearby." "Nice little town," she said, stirring her drink without looking at me. "Quiet. Safe." Her sunglasses reflected my own face back at me, distorted and pale under the fluorescent light. Something in my stomach twisted, though I couldn't say why. She smiled again, too wide, too still, and said, "Good, I like knowing who's local." "Yes, sort of," I said, forcing a polite smile. "Why?" she asked, tilting her head like she was trying to read me. "We're actually looking to expand a business in this area," she went on, glancing at the man across from her, the one with the beard who was now scribbling something in that red binder. "Ever think about doing something else besides this place?" I laughed softly, that kind of nervous, practiced laugh you use when you want to sound friendly but not interested. "I'm good where I'm at. First job, just trying to get on my feet, you know." She leaned forward on her elbows. Her perfume was thick and sweet, stinging the back of my throat. "We run a private cleaning company. Small, discreet, real high-end clients. I love hiring girls like you. Pretty, polite, good energy." The word discreet caught in my throat. I swallowed hard, pretending I didn't hear the way she said girls like you. Before I could think of an excuse, one of the men spoke for the first time, voice low and gravelly. "You'd make 30 grand in no time," he said without looking up. "Most girls don't even have to do half the work." I froze, then forced a smile. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it. "I appreciate it," I said carefully, "but I'm not really looking for anything new right now." The woman didn't back off. "It's not even hard work," she said, tone sliding from warm to insistent. "Just showing up, being presentable. You wouldn't even have to clean, really. We've got a van that picks up our girls, no need to worry about rides." I took a step back, forcing a polite laugh. "No, really, I'm good. Thanks, though." Her smile didn't move. "Least you can do is check out a picture of the van. It's in my car." She pointed out toward the lot, already pulling her phone from her hand like it had been waiting there. "I've got it right here. Just want to show you real quick." The logic didn't make sense. If the photo was on her phone, why point to the car? My skin prickled. "I'm on shift," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I should get back to the front." The man beside her chuckled under his breath, low and mean. My whole body screamed leave, so I did. I retreated behind the counter and stayed there until their trays were empty and their table cleared. At 5 o'clock sharp, they finally left. As they passed the window, the woman turned back and waved. Same syrupy smile, slow and deliberate. I didn't wave back. Rye came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, maybe too quickly. "Just some weird offer. Said they run a cleaning business, but it didn't sound right." He laughed. "Hey, 30 grand's 30 grand. "Shut up," I said, punching his arm lightly, pretending it was funny. But my stomach felt hollow. Something about their eyes, the way they watched me. It sat wrong. That night, his grandma came to pick us up like she always did. She was a quiet woman, tiny and polite, always smelled faintly of lavender. We were halfway down Route 19 when I mentioned the cleaning company, trying to make it sound casual. Her hands froze on the steering wheel. "What did you say?" she asked, voice suddenly sharp. "They said they had this cleaning business," I explained. "High-end clients, easy money. They wanted me to." She pulled the car over so fast the tires scraped the shoulder. Her face had gone pale. "That wasn't a cleaning service," she said quietly. "That was a trafficker. That's exactly how they talk. Pretty girls. Easy work. No car needed. They lure you with the van." "Honey," she shook her head. "You were this close." I couldn't speak. My chest tightened, my hands trembling in my lap. The reality of what she said hit like cold water down my back. I could still smell the woman's perfume, hear her voice. "You'd be perfect." That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the binder, the pen, the way that man smirked when I stepped back. The next day I tried to shake it off, told myself I was overreacting. Probably just sleazy salespeople or some weird MLM scam. But then the next morning something happened that made the world tilt all over again. It was around 11:30 a.m., just before the lunch rush. I was wiping down the counter when the door opened and a man walked in. Late 40s, maybe 50. Bald, clean-shaven button-up shirt tucked too neatly into his jeans. He walked straight to the counter, ordered a black coffee, and sat in the same booth near the front window. He carried a red binder. With a black pen clipped to it, my blood ran cold. He didn't pull out a phone, didn't touch his coffee, just sat there watching, scribbling every few minutes. His expression never changed. Rye was in the back prepping fries, humming quietly to himself. I busied myself with napkin dispensers, pretending not to notice the man, but every time I looked up, his eyes were on me. Not curious, calculating. 2 hours passed. He hadn't moved. Then finally he spoke. His voice was low, but I was near enough to catch it. "Yeah, I moved it," he said into his phone. "Should cover that by tonight." "No, the girls are still lined up. I'll send their cuts. We need another place down here closer to the water." My heart slammed in my ears. I turned, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles went white, and hurried to the back. "Rye," I hissed, my voice shaking. "That guy out front, he's with them. The binder, the pen, he's with them." Rye's face went still. He peered through the window that looked out into the dining area, eyes narrowing. After a long moment, he nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll help you run food. Just stay close." We hovered near his table, pretending to clean until he finally stood, gathered his binder, and left without a word. His untouched coffee sat cooling in the sunlight. I quit the next day. Handed Mel my 2 weeks. She didn't ask why, just nodded like maybe she already knew. Like maybe this wasn't the first time. Sometimes I still wonder if I should have called the cops or told someone higher up. But at the time I was just scared and grateful. Grateful that I hadn't gone to that car. Grateful Rye was there. Grateful my gut finally screamed loud enough for me to hear it. Now years later, every time I close up somewhere, a store, a cafe, anywhere, I still check the parking lot first. I still glance over my shoulder before unlocking my car. And I still hear her voice in my head, soft and sugary as poison. "You'd be perfect." I wasn't, and thank God I never found out what she meant.
I never thought I'd find myself in food service again. After quitting my last job at a greasy diner on the east side, I swore I was done with the late nights, the cling of fryer oil in my clothes, and the broken hum of an old cash register. I meant it too. But the thing about promises is, they don't mean much when rent's due and your bank account's flashing double digits. Crestston Hollow was supposed to be a fresh start. Quiet, clean, weirdly cheerful in that postcard kind of way. Too cheerful, actually. The kind of town where strangers say hello before you've even made eye contact, and the air smells a little too much like flowers no one can name. It felt like something was just off. Not wrong exactly, just off. Like the town was holding its breath, like the smiles were masks. I took the first job I could get, night shift at a local Wendy's. It was pretty much what you'd expect. Generic fast food joint with the red-haired mascot and a color scheme that never let you forget it was part of a dying empire. I didn't care. It was money. Glenn, the manager, was this wiry, jittery guy with a mustache that looked like it came free with his nicotine addiction. Hired me on the spot after my competition no-showed. "You'll barely see anyone after 9, he'd said, with a shrug. Easy money. He wasn't lying. The first few weeks were quiet. Too quiet, honestly. Darla, the cook, clocked out at 9 sharp, leaving me to babysit the graveyard shift alone. From then on, it was just me. The soft crackle of the fryer and the flicker of fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. I'd clean already spotless counters, refill sauce trays no one touched, and half listen to true crime podcasts. While my brain wandered, it was a Friday when things shifted, not into anything terrifying, at least not yet, just annoying. Around 9:30, a pack of teenagers stumbled in. Loud, obnoxious, probably drunk or high or both. One of them barked out, half the menu while another kept knocking into the napkin dispensers like it was a game. Some red-faced kid with a backward cap kept calling me Red, like the uniform made me a cartoon. I bit my tongue. You learn to do that in food service. By the time they left, it was 11:10. The place looked like a hurricane had rolled through. Fries ground into the tile, ketchup handprints smeared on the touchscreen like a horror movie, napkins crumpled in little paper tombs all over the floor. I sighed, popped in my earbuds, and cranked the volume. Some sad indie band I barely remembered liking played while I grabbed a rag and started scrubbing. I was halfway through wiping down the front counter when the chime above the door rang. I looked up, expecting one of the teens had come back to grab a phone or continue being an asshole, but no one was there. The door swung shut with that soft whoosh it made, slow like someone had nudged it and walked away. I paused the music and pulled out one earbud. Nothing. I stood still for a second, listening to the silence press against the windows. That's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 soft, deliberate knocks, like a child politely asking for attention. My eyes drifted toward the counter. She stood just on the other side. A little girl, 8, maybe 9, pale freckled skin, ginger hair braided so precisely it looked sculpted, each braid tied with a neat blue ribbon. Her dress, blue and white, lace-trimmed, looked like it belonged in a 1950s soda shop ad. She even had those polished black shoes with tiny white socks ruffled at the edges. For a second, my brain didn't register fear, just irritation, a prank. Had to be. One of those kids must have roped their little sister into sneaking in behind them. Some kind of TikTok scare bit, probably. I forced a smile. Hey, nice costume, but we're closed. She didn't blink, didn't smile, just tilted her head like I was the strange one. Okay, I said, walking around the counter, voice firmer. You can tell your brothers or whoever that I'm not in the mood for games. Still no reaction. She walked slowly, deliberately, to one of the booths, climbed onto the bench like she'd done it 100 times and picked up one of our laminated menus. The old ones. We hadn't used those since everything went digital. This one looked greasy, faded, like it had been sitting there for years. I want one of everything, she said, her voice calm, clipped, and far too clear. Take your time. I blinked. Kid, seriously, we're closed, and you shouldn't be out here alone. Where are your parents? She looked up at me finally. Her eyes were gray, too gray, like an old photo. I am home, she said. And just like that, the temperature dropped. Not metaphorically, I mean actually dropped. My breath fogged. I felt it, a prickling in my arms, a deep instinctive lurch in my stomach. But I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was a draft. The fryer always made the front feel colder. Still, I took a step back. Okay, I think maybe you need to sit tight while I call someone. The girl's eyes followed me, but she didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just sat there like she was waiting for me to serve her a milkshake and fries from a decade that didn't exist anymore. I reached for my phone. That's when the lights began to flicker. I stepped out into the parking lot, heart hammering, expecting to catch someone ducking behind a car, maybe holding a phone and laughing. Some part of me still clung to the idea this was all a prank, but the lot was empty. Still, the street stretched out in both directions like a dead artery. Even the gas station across the road, a place that usually glowed all night, was dark. No flickering neon, no hum of fluorescent bulbs, just black glass and silence. A knot tightened in my chest as I turned back toward the restaurant. She was still there, exactly where I'd left her, perched on the booth seat, menu open, eyes on me like she'd never looked away. "Listen," I said, stepping inside again, voice shaking despite my best effort to sound firm. "You can't be here. This isn't a game. If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops." She stood slowly, as if the very idea of being threatened offended her. "You shouldn't be rude," she said, each word clipped and icy. "Not in my home." Her home? That's when I felt it. The air thickened, heavy as wet cement. The temperature dropped like a stone. I saw my own breath curl out. In front of me, pale and ghostly in the flickering light. The girl smiled. Not playfully, not innocently. It was the slow, deliberate smile of something that wanted to see me break. I didn't say another word. I backed away step by step, past the counter, never turning my back. My hand brushed the swinging kitchen door. I turned and bolted. I don't remember the first few seconds of the run, just the pounding of my shoes against pavement, the way the cold air burned my throat. I sprinted down the block toward the apartment complex where I rented a tiny upstairs room. But I never heard her behind me. Only the scream. It was like a siren, high, sharp, inhuman. The kind of sound that makes your brain recoil before your ears can process it. I turned just once against every instinct, and she was there. She shouldn't have been that fast, not with her tiny legs, not with that frilly dress. But she was gaining, full sprint, the blue ribbons in her hair flapping wildly, and in her hand, a knife, long, thin, serrated. I recognized it immediately. One of ours, from the prep station. I pushed harder, lungs burning, but something caught my leg. Maybe a crack in the sidewalk or maybe something else entirely. I went down hard, skinned my hands, busted my knee. Then she was on me. The first stab hit my shoulder, white-hot pain ripping through the fabric of my jacket. The next sliced, across my arm, then my leg. I screamed, but it was like the night swallowed the sound. Her eyes were inches from mine, empty and glassy, like someone had painted fake life onto marbles. She smelled like lavender and rot. "You all need to learn respect," she whispered. She raised the knife again. Then headlights flooded the street. A car screeched to a stop. A woman's voice shrieked from behind the wheel. The girl froze. Then, without a sound, she darted into the dark like a shadow scattering under light. Gone. The police came. Glenn came. They asked questions I could barely understand through the pain. The paramedics stitched me up and gave me something for the shock. The woman who'd stopped her car backed up my story. She saw the girl, saw the knife, described her exactly, but the cops didn't find her. They said it might have been a hallucination, stress-induced, maybe a drug reaction even though I tested clean. One officer suggested a woman with dwarfism, like that bizarre case in Europe. Everyone had a theory, none of them right. I quit Wendy's 2 days later, didn't even bother to give notice. That should have been the end of it. But Crestston Hollow doesn't let go easy. Even after I moved on, new job at a coffee shop, more. Sunlight, no more graveyard shifts. The nightmare stayed. She stayed. The same little girl, the same perfect braids, the same knife glinting just before I woke up drenched in sweat. And then one night, As I was closing up the shop, I caught a glimpse of her face in the chrome reflection of the espresso machine. Just for a second. But it was her. I turned, heart in my throat. The room was empty. I told myself it was stress. Sleep deprivation. Ghosts of trauma clawing through the cracks. Then the old Wendy's building caught fire. It wasn't big, no bodies, no injuries, but enough to gut the place. The news said it was faulty wiring, an electrical issue. But the photos showed too much. Burned floors, blackened counters, like the building had been hollowed out from the inside. I went to see it the next day. Something in me had to go, maybe to find closure, maybe to prove to myself it was over. The smell hit first, char and ash, old grease turned to smoke. The ruins sat behind yellow tape, a skeleton of steel, and scorched tile. But it wasn't just the fire damage. It felt like the blaze had burned away the illusion, revealing something older underneath, something rotten. I stared into the wreckage and felt a weight in my chest. A deep, gnawing certainty that this wasn't about a ghost girl with a knife. She'd been a symptom, a warning, not the disease. As I turned to leave, something moved in the smoke. A small figure stepped forward, too short to be grown, too deliberate to be a trick of the light. I froze. She stepped from the shadows of the ruin. Same dress, same ribbons. Her shoes were still polished. She smiled at me. "You didn't learn your lesson, did you?" Her voice was louder now, stronger. I turned to run, but just before I did, I heard her whisper one last time, cold, sharp, final, "You'll never leave." I wasn't even supposed to be there that night. One of those dumb, tired decisions you make when your brain's fried and your stomach's louder than your common sense. Ellie, my girlfriend, and I had just left a low-key house party on the outskirts of Greenwood, Indiana. It was around 11:15 p.m., cold, quiet, and we were both worn thin and cranky. The second we got into the car, it hit us. We hadn't eaten since lunch. Ellie rubbed her hands together, blowing into them for warmth. "I'd kill for fries," she muttered. "Something greasy. I don't even care what." I laughed, mostly, just to keep the mood from sliding into total exhaustion. "Only thing that might be open is Wendy's." "God, yes," she said, eyes closing. "I don't even care if it's fresh. I just want it hot." We were close to the I-65 exit, and sure enough, off County Line Road, we spotted one of those sad-looking Wendy's locations still glowing under flickering signage. The open light in the window buzzed softly. That struck me as odd. Most spots around here shut down early during the week, but maybe it was one of the 24-hour ones, or maybe I just didn't care enough to question it. The lot was almost empty. Just one vehicle, a dark red SUV, beat up and parked crooked, probably. And employees. I pulled in beside it. "This place looks dead," I muttered, eyeing the building. "Even better," Ellie said, tugging her hoodie tight against the wind. "No line." We stepped into the vestibule, and immediately I felt it. That wrong kind of quiet. The air was heavy still, like walking into a vacuum. A mix of stale fryer grease and something sour, like dirty mop water that hadn't been changed in days, hung in the air. The lights buzzed overhead, white and clinical, casting this sickly glow over the scuffed tile floors. No music, no chatter, just the distant hum of a kitchen fan and the faint mechanical whine of something unseen. Behind the counter stood a man, mid to late 40s, tall, thin in the way that suggested he hadn't eaten properly in weeks. His limbs looked stretched, like too much marionette, not enough man. He wore the standard Wendy's polo, but the sleeves strained against his bony wrists. A patchy graying beard clung to his jaw, and his eyes were wrong, wide, glassy. They didn't blink often enough. Vacant, but aware. Like a deer frozen mid-panic, but somehow inverted. Like he was watching you panic and enjoying the stillness of it. "Evening," I said, trying not to sound as off-kilter as I felt. He didn't answer, didn't move, just raised one eyebrow, slow, deliberate, like he was running some inner calculation. I nudged Ellie. Go hit the restroom if you want. I'll order. She nodded and walked off, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the sticky floor. I turned back to the guy. Can I get a number 6 spicy with a Coke? He didn't say a word, just tapped the register, each movement stilted, mechanical. Never broke eye contact, like he didn't need to look. I handed him my card. His fingers were ice cold and thin as wire. He swiped it without a sound. Then, nothing. No bag, no receipt, just a slow, deliberate point behind me. No receipt? I asked, a weak smile twitching at my mouth. He slowly shook his head. I forced a laugh. All right, man. Guess I'll just wait then. And I stood there. For several minutes. The silence felt thicker by the second. The guy didn't move, didn't blink. Just stared. Like I was being timed. Like I was already on some kind of stage and the show had started. After 10 minutes, I checked my phone. 11:38 p.m. Still no sign of Ellie. I glanced down the hallway, toward the bathrooms. The air there looked darker somehow, like the light had forgotten how to reach it. Ellie? I called out. My voice sounded too loud. Nothing. The man behind the counter blinked, finally, but slowly, like he was processing something unfolding far away. I'm just gonna check on her, I said, giving a polite nod. No response. I headed down the hallway. The women's restroom door was closed. I pressed my ear gently against it. No sound. I knocked. Ellie? You good? Silence. Then, just barely, I noticed something odd. A soft, flickering glow leaking from under the door. Not the sharp white. A fluorescence. This was pulsing. Blue. Then red. Then green. A rhythm, almost like breathing. Ellie? I called again. Babe? Still nothing. My chest tightened. I hesitated, then reached out and pushed the door open. What I saw didn't make sense. The bathroom lights were off. The only illumination came from an old CRT box TV set in the corner, sitting on the tile like someone had dragged it there for a purpose. The screen jittered through an insane loop, hypnotic spirals, abstract shapes, random flashes of symbols in a language I didn't recognize. The color pulses from before were coming from the screen, casting the whole room in shifting, nauseating hues, and Ellie was standing in front of it, still, frozen. She wasn't watching it. She was in it. Eyes wide open, unblinking. Her arms hung limp at her sides, and her body, too relaxed. Like the muscles weren't hers anymore. Ellie? My voice cracked. I stepped inside, the glow wrapping around me like something physical. The shadows danced across the walls, over the grime-slicked tiles and cracked mirror. The static from the TV hissed like radio noise, but there was something else beneath it. A low hum, deep and droning. A sound that felt like it was vibrating, inside my spine. It wasn't just noise, it felt like it was thinking. Ellie, I said louder, stepping closer. I reached for her arm. The second my fingers touched her, she jolted. Not a full-body flinch, just a twitch. Her eyes blinked rapidly, then froze. Her lips parted, and she tried to say something, but nothing came out. Just a faint breath. I didn't move. I just stood there, hand still on her arm, trying to understand what I was looking at. Something was wrong with her, and with this place, and with that screen, and something told me we were not supposed to be here. She swayed on her feet like she'd just stepped off a carnival ride, then turned her head toward me, eyes glassy, unfocused, like she was trying to remember how to use them. Hey, I said softly, reaching out to steady her. You okay? She blinked, slow and uncertain. Then, almost as if surprised by her own voice, she whispered, I don't know. What was I doing? You tell me, I said, trying to keep my voice light even though my stomach was in knots. Her gaze floated past me, drawn toward the TV. I think I was watching something. No kidding, I muttered, giving the screen a quick glance. It was still flickering with that chaotic nonsense, the spirals, the shapes, the foreign characters like some madman's idea of a screensaver. I crouched beside the old box TV, yanked the cord from the wall. The screen snapped off with a soft pop, plunging the room into heavy silence and darker shadows. "Come on," I said, grabbing her hand. "We're getting out of here." We stepped out into the hallway and instantly something felt off. Worse than before. The overhead fluorescence had shifted to a dim amber glow, the kind of light that makes everything look sick and wrong. The buzzing had intensified, deep and erratic now, like power lines during a storm, and the man from behind the counter? Gone. "Let's move," I whispered. We didn't run. Not yet. Just walked fast, steps echoing too loudly in the empty place. When we reached the front, we stopped dead. The front door was locked. I grabbed the handle, twisted, shoved. Nothing. Didn't even rattle. It was like it had fused shut. "What the hell?" I muttered, trying again. No give. I turned toward the counter. Empty. No food waiting. No register sounds. No kitchen noises. Ellie was breathing hard, her hand clamped tight to my sleeve. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "You saw him, right? That guy behind the counter?" "I saw him," I said. Didn't say a word. Didn't even move much. Then, something from the kitchen. A loud clatter. We froze. Another noise. Followed. Wet. Dragging. Like something heavy being pulled over tile. Then a low scraping sound. And then, footsteps. Slow. Intentional. Not hurried. Not human. I backed us up instinctively, already pulling my phone from my pocket. No signal. Just that mocking red X in the corner. I looked at Ellie. "Window," I said. "Bathroom." We ran. Back down the hallway, past the flickering lights, slammed the restroom door open. Ellie didn't hesitate. She climbed onto the toilet, reaching for the tiny window above. Fingers scrambled, found the latch. It wasn't painted shut, thank God, and shoved it open. She wriggled her upper body through, then twisted sideways and slipped out. "Hurry," she hissed, voice tight with panic. I jumped up, wedging my shoulders through. My hoodie caught on something sharp. I yanked it free just as I heard the bathroom door creak open behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't look. I didn't have to. Whatever it was, it had waited long enough. I kicked my leg out, dropped hard to the ground beside Ellie. We took off, across the back lot, sprinting through cracked asphalt and weeds until we hit the tree line. We didn't stop. Didn't glance back. Once we found a gas station with lights on, our phones finally lit up with service bars. I called 911, and we waited under the humming fluorescence, catching our breath. A cruiser pulled in 20 minutes later. The cop looked tired, skeptical from the second he stepped out. We explained everything, probably too fast, voices overlapping. The man behind the counter, the locked door, the weird TV, the dragging noise. When he came back from checking the place out, he looked rattled, pale. "There's nothing inside, he said, glancing between us. "Doors are unlocked. No staff, no food, no electricity." "What about the red SUV?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He shook his head. "Lot's empty." I tried again, describing the screen, the pulsing light, the buzzing. He listened, but I could see it on his face. We sounded like we'd been drinking. Or worse. "I'll file a report," he said, like he was doing us a favor. But if I had to guess, couple of kids broke in, set up some prank. Weird lighting, maybe projection. "You two should go home. Get some rest." He didn't wait for a response, just got back in his car and drove off. I've driven past that Wendy's 3 times since then. Every time it looks the same. Boarded windows, weeds creeping through the pavement, a sagging roofline tagged in graffiti. The open sign? Gone. I asked around. Guy at the BP on the corner said that Wendy's shut down months ago. Fire in the kitchen. Never reopened. He said the night manager, some guy named Leonard, went missing around the same time. They never found him. Now sometimes Ellie wakes up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, mumbling about colors, about the sound. I started unplugging. The TV before bed. I keep my phone on airplane mode. Whatever happened that night, whatever we saw, I don't think it was meant for us, and I know this much. Something else knew we were there. I never thought delivering fast food could get you killed, or worse. When I started at the Wendy's on Jefferson Street in Louisville, it wasn't part of some plan. No dreams of management, no 5-year goal. I was 24, broke, and barely functioning. My bank account was in the red. My body ran on cold coffee and 4 hours of sleep. I was pulling double shifts, DoorDash during the day, slinging burgers at Wendy's from 6 in the evening until 2, sometimes 3 in the morning. It wasn't glamorous. Hell, it barely qualified as survival. My arms were dotted with old, grease burns. My shoes smelled like fryer oil, and there was this constant hum from the fryers that felt like it was drilling into the back of my skull. But it was steady, and steady in my world meant safe. Carl, the night manager, was a piece of work. Gruff, permanently limping, always wearing a nicotine patch on his neck like a war medal no one asked about. He talked in grunts and half sentences, mostly about punk bands from the 80s no one cared about, least of all the high schoolers working the front counter. But one night during a lull, he flagged me down near the back exit. The air back there always smelled like mop water and the 6-sweet rot of bad lettuce. "You want to make real money?" he asked, flicking his lighter to life. He knew we weren't supposed to smoke there, but rules didn't apply to Carl. "Always," I said, drying my hands on my crusty apron. He handed me a laminated card with just a number on it. No name, no logo, just a number. Fridays and Saturdays, late night deliveries. Tips are cash. Store takes a cut, you get the rest. I squinted at the card. What kind of deliveries? Off the books. Some weird-ass places. Ash Hollow, River Bend Motel, back roads off I-64, hillbilly cryptid country. He chuckled. A raspy smoker's laugh. But drunk people, they tip better than God. I didn't hesitate. Rent was due, my truck was running on borrowed time, and groceries were starting to look like a luxury. I nodded and shoved the card into my wallet. The first couple weekends were weird, sure, but manageable. College kids too baked to remember. Ordering. An old man who gave me a $10 tip for bringing him a baked potato. A woman at the Riverbend Motel who opened the door in nothing but a silk robe and asked if I liked jazz, but nothing that screamed danger. That changed the last Saturday of October. The whole shift had been off from the beginning. The drive-thru. Speaker was glitching, stuck on a weird, high-pitched whine. Some kid barfed in the dining room, and Marcy, who worked the window, looked ready to kill someone. Carl looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Pale, twitchy, like he hadn't slept in days. He kept staring at the security monitors like he was watching for something, his eyes darting between screens like he expected someone, or something, to appear. Around midnight, Marcy came over with a brown paper bag, eyes shifting nervously toward Carl's office. "One spicy chicken combo, double fries, chocolate frosty," she said, then quieter. "Name says Mara V. Address is out past Ash Hollow." I paused. "That's past the gas station, right?" "Yeah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You sure you want to take it? I can call it off." Before I could answer, Carl stepped out of his office like he'd been listening the whole time. He didn't say a word at first, just stared at the bag, then at me. His face was pale and tight like he was holding something back. "If you're going to Ash Hollow," he muttered, "don't go past the old reservoir." I blinked. "Why not?" He shook his head slowly. "GPS gets weird. People get lost. Just don't." That should have been a red flag, but I was exhausted, broke, and already reaching for my keys. My Tacoma was a rusted-out mess that sounded like a dying animal every time I hit a pothole, but it still ran. I punched the address into Google Maps and cranked the heater. It was colder than it should have been for late October, and the fog rolled in thick, pressing against the windshield like cotton soaked in milk. The city fell away quickly, buildings giving way to trees, streetlights blinking out until I was alone on a 2-lane road that wound like a snake through the woods. The fog swallowed my headlights, making it feel like I was driving through some kind of void. Still, I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The radio fizzled out around the same time the houses disappeared. I figured it was just a dead zone. But when I tried switching stations, it all turned to static. Then silence. Dead air. Then the GPS froze. My little blue dot hovered for a moment, then jumped sideways. The road disappeared from the map, just a blank gray field like I'd driven off the planet. Awesome, I muttered, forcing a laugh. And that's when I saw her. A woman, tall and unmoving, standing dead center in the road. She didn't wave, didn't flinch, didn't even look like she was breathing. I slammed the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt, tires skidding on wet pavement as I slammed the brakes. My seatbelt snapped tight across my chest. Heart pounding, I leaned out the driver's side window, squinting through the fog. "Hey, you all right?" Nothing. No movement, just silence and mist. She tilted her head, slow, deliberate, unnatural. Like a marionette whose strings had been pulled wrong. The fog coiled around her, thick and unmoving. I reached for my phone, hands trembling. I wasn't sure who I was planning to call. Carl, Marcy, 911, anyone who might answer. But before I could even unlock the screen, she was gone, not walked away, not ran, just gone. Like she'd been edited out of reality. Hell no, I muttered, jamming the truck into gear. I pressed the gas, wheels spinning for a moment before gripping. The road jerked into a hard left, then another sharp right. Trees leaned in, branches overhanging the road like grasping fingers. They looked like they were watching. The GPS was still dead, just a spinning wheel and a blank screen. I was flying blind. My breath shortened, chest tight. Something primal crept in, like my body knew what my brain wouldn't admit. I shouldn't be here. Then the phone rang. No caller ID. I stared at the screen for a second before swiping to answer. Hello? A man's voice. Low, hoarse, like he hadn't used it in years. Don't go any further. What? Who is this? Turn off the engine, get out of the truck. His voice was urgent, cracking, panicked. Who are you? Get out, now. Don't ask questions, don't look back. I tried to sound brave. I'm calling the cops. You already passed her. If you don't move now, she's going to feed. Something in his voice, this tired, broken certainty, made me freeze. I don't know why I listened, but I did. I killed the engine. The quiet was deafening. I opened the door and the cold slammed into me like a wave. The air smelled metallic, thick with rust, rot, and something worse. Then a heavy thud. I spun around hard in my throat. Another thud, this time on the roof of the truck. Then came the sound. Wet, sickening, like meat slapping metal. She was on. The hood, slamming a dead deer against the windshield like it owed her money. Over and over again the carcass hit the glass, antlers cracking. Blood smeared like finger paint. Her arms were too long, joints bending in ways they shouldn't. Knees, inverted. Her dress, or what was left of it, flapped in the wind like old curtains. And her face, there wasn't one, just stretched skin. Smooth and pale, like a mask made from wax paper pulled too tight. I don't remember screaming. I must have, but the next thing I knew, I was somewhere else. A cabin. Dusty. Cold. Flickering firelight casting shadows across the wooden walls. I was lying on a cot, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like ash and damp earth. A man stood by the fire. Face, hidden by shadow and the brim of a worn-out hat. You looked back, he said. My mouth was dry. Who the hell are you? Doesn't matter. Just someone who made the same mistake. He handed me a bowl of soup. It was hot. Salty. I didn't question it. He didn't say much after that. Every question I asked, where are we? What was that thing? How did you find me? He just shook, his head. Wait until morning, was all he offered. When the sun came up, I walked outside. The woods were quiet. No fog, no tracks, just me. The cabin was gone when I looked back. My truck, gone too. I walked for hours until I reached a highway, called a tow company, told them I broke down. They found nothing. When I got back to the Wendy's, Carl just looked at me like I was insane. "Said you never left," he muttered, shaking his head. "Clock never started. No order ever came in." I asked Marcy about Mara V. She swore up and down that name never showed up. No ticket, no bag, nothing in the system, no spicy chicken, no double fries, no Frosty. But I remembered. The smell. The static. Her. And from that night on, I stayed inside any time fog rolled in on Jefferson Street. Because once you've seen her, she doesn't forget. And she's always hungry. Weeks passed. I tried pretending nothing happened. Showing up for shifts, smiling through drive-thru windows, laughing at drunk kids and flipping frozen patties, going through the motions. But normal didn't exist anymore, not for me. Sometimes I'd see her, not directly, just glimpses. A flicker of movement on the drive-thru camera, a reflection in the fryer glass, a smear of something dark and sticky on the Frosty machine that no one else noticed. Then, one night, I found something in my locker, the laminated card. Same one Carl had given me, same number. But this time in the corner there was a message scribbled in jagged red ink. "She's still hungry." I quit on the spot. Walked out mid-shift, moved across town. Swore I'd never set foot in that Wendy's again. And for a while I was okay. Just another guy with a DoorDash app and a shaky smile. But last night, the ping came in. Spicy chicken combo, double fries, chocolate Frosty. Delivery address? Ash Hollow. The app wouldn't let me decline. No, back button, no cancel, no customer support, and this time, there's no reservoir to turn back at. My name's Eric Shaw, and after everything I'd seen working nights at Wendy's, I figured nothing could really surprise me anymore. Grease fires, wasted guys hammering on the drive-thru window at 2 a.m., even a rat darting across the walk-in cooler once. I'd been doing the closing shift for just over 6 months in Topeka, and it was always the same. Me, a mop, and my earbuds blasting Zeppelin or Sabbath just loud enough to drown out the hum of the fryers and the ghosts of 1,000 burger. Rappers. It was a little past 11:30. I was in the back near the fry station, mopping up this nasty, sticky mess that looked like someone dumped a whole bottle of fake blood on the floor. Strawberry syrup. Again. Probably Alana. She was always moving too fast, trying to finish her tasks before her ride showed up. I had one earbud in, the other dangling loose so I could still hear if someone needed something. Though at that hour, it was mostly silence. Too much silence now that I think about it. The lights in the back flickered once, a brief stutter like a fluorescent hiccup. That had been happening all week, nothing new. I didn't even glance up. I didn't hear the front door chime. Didn't hear the register beep. And I sure as hell didn't hear the scream, not until I adjusted my earbud, nudging it slightly as one track ended. Population. That word drifted into my ear like it didn't belong. At first I thought it was part of the song, some weird outro or distorted sample. But then it came again, sharper this time. Population. Then again, closer. Population. That. Last one? That wasn't music. That was a voice low and deliberate. I froze, mop mid-stroke. My heart stuttered, then pounded like it was trying to claw its way up my throat. My breath caught, and then that cold rush hit me, deep and primal, the same kind of cold I'd felt 5 years ago, standing on our driveway while my brother bled out next to the mailbox. That kind of cold never leaves you. Pop, pop, gunshots, real ones, inside the store. I yanked out my remaining earbud and held my breath, straining to hear something, anything. But it was dead quiet again, like the building itself was holding its breath with me. I moved toward the kitchen, creeping one slow step at a time. My sneakers made soft peeling sounds against the syrup-coated floor. Each step felt like it could give me away. I peeked around the corner into the lobby, and I almost threw up. Alana, Greg, Mark, Rhonda, all kneeling in a line, hands laced behind their heads. I recognized them instantly, but their faces, God, their faces looked hollow, almost like masks, confused, terrified, their features blurred by shock. It was like they weren't even them anymore. Two other bodies were already on the ground. I couldn't tell who they were from that angle. Just limbs at awkward angles, blood seeping out like oil, pooling and spreading with slow confidence. Then I saw him. Tall guy, hoodie, jeans, pale, scruffy beard, holding a pistol in both hands like he'd done it before. He didn't flinch, didn't bark orders, didn't even look angry. Just calm, too calm. He walked over to Greg. Poor kid had only been working here a week. Barely 20. Still had his little trainee badge clipped to his apron like it meant something. Another shot. Greg crumpled sideways like a puppet with cut strings. Couldn't move. My knees buckled, but I caught myself on a shelf. The metal clanged under my weight, sharp, loud, echoing like a bell, like a signal. His head snapped toward the sound. I ran, didn't think, didn't hesitate. I just turned and bolted through the kitchen, past the freezer, and into the stockroom. I dove behind a stack of cardboard boxes by the triple sink, the steel edge catching my shin on the way down. I bit my tongue to keep from yelling. My breaths came fast. Too fast. I pressed a hand over my mouth to muffle the sound. My palms were soaked. My shirt clung to my back. My throat felt like it was full of sand. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Boots, slow and heavy, crunching softly on the sticky floor, getting closer. He was talking to himself. Low, mumbled words I couldn't make out. Not angry, not frantic, just wrong. Disconnected. The door creaked open. He was inside. I shrank into myself, curling behind the boxes like a trapped animal. Through a gap between the flaps, I saw the tip of his boot stop in front of me. Blood streaked the laces. My stomach turned. I gripped the mop handle tighter, my knuckles going white. It was pathetic, but it was all I had. I told myself if he saw me, I'd swing. I'd have to. He crouched slightly. Our eyes almost met. Then, crash. Something toppled over across the room. Metal. Loud. The man spun around, instinctive, gun aimed toward the sound. And from the shadows, Marcus lunged. I hadn't even known he was still here. They collided, full force, crashing to the ground. The fight was raw, messy, desperate. No clean moves, no tactics, just survival. Marcus clawed for the gun, fingers slipping on sweat and blood. But the man was stronger. They hit the ground hard. I heard a grunt, then two shots close together. Marcus gasped, sharp, wet, and grabbed at his side. I couldn't tell if he was still breathing. He tried to crawl away, dragging himself with one hand while the other clutched his side, blood smearing in his wake. Another shot cracked through the air. Marcus jerked once, then went still. He didn't move again. I wanted to scream. God, I wanted to scream, but my body betrayed me. I was frozen, completely locked in place. Sweat poured down my face like it was leaking out of me. My legs, my arms, every muscle refused to obey. I couldn't even cry. Then I heard another voice. Heavy footfalls first, then a figure emerged through the open doorway into the stockroom. Shorter than the first guy, broader, bald, thick chain around his neck that glinted under the flickering fluorescence. His jaw clenched tight, lips curled into something sour. He didn't look scared, just annoyed. Finished checking? He barked, voice low and sharp. Make sure no one's breathing. I stopped breathing right then and there. My heart dropped to the floor. My body finally moved, just barely, crawling on numb limbs toward the sink. I wedged myself into the cabinet, beneath it, dragging the door shut just before the boots came closer. I curled in, knees crushed against my chest, my back pressed against cold pipework, the smell of bleach burning my nostrils. It stung so bad my eyes watered. I pressed both hands over my mouth and tried to stay as still as possible. Then, yank, the cabinet door ripped open. There was no thinking. No plan, just panic. I exploded outward, slamming my weight into the gunman. He staggered backward, arms flailing as he crashed into a wire rack. Bottles, towels, gloves, everything went flying. He hit the floor hard and I followed. We fought. It wasn't clean. It wasn't brave. It was messy, savage, like two animals in a pit. I had nothing, just my fists, my rage, and sheer desperation. He cracked me across the ribs, pain blooming, like fire under my skin. I grabbed a broom leaning against the wall and swung, catching him across the shoulder. He dropped it, grabbed my throat. His fingers were iron. My vision blurred, and I could feel the blood pulsing in my ears. I scrambled, blindly, hand slapping against the floor, searching for anything. My fingers closed around something small. A janitor's key, or maybe a broken bottleneck, I don't even know. I stabbed. Again. And again. I didn't stop until he screamed and his grip loosened. I shoved him off, gasping for air, my vision doubling. I crawled out of the stockroom, blood smeared across my shirt. His, not mine. Thank God. I ran. Or tried to. My legs barely worked. I stumbled through the back hallway, sneakers skidding on the tile. But he wasn't the only one. The second guy was already at the hallway exit. Gun raised. Bang! The shot shattered something behind me. I ducked and pivoted, bolting the other direction. Adrenaline giving my body what my brain couldn't. I found another room, some dusty, half-forgotten office or filing closet. I slammed the door shut and shoved a chair under the knob, hands shaking so bad I could barely lift it. My chest heaved. Every breath scraped the inside of my throat. Then, boom! The doorknob exploded in splinters. The bullet had torn through the lock. I didn't think. I leapt onto the desk, reached up, shoved open a ceiling tile. The space above was dark and tight, filled with insulation dust and spiderwebs. I didn't care. I hauled myself up and scrambled forward, coughing, eyes watering. Every breath was a prayer. Every movement felt like it might be my last. I don't know how long I crawled. It could have been 30 seconds. It could have been a lifetime. My whole body screamed with pain. My ribs throbbed with every inch forward. Then, I saw light. I dropped down into another hallway and didn't stop. I burst through the emergency exit barefoot, lost a shoe somewhere, and collapsed into the freezing Kansas night. The shock of the cold hit me like a slap. I could see my breath. My hands were trembling. I didn't even feel my feet on the asphalt as I stumbled toward the main road. Then, headlights. A car swerved, slowed. A man jumped out. I collapsed beside him, babbling, crying, shaking so hard my teeth clacked. "Help me," I kept saying. "Please, please help me." The police showed up minutes later. The first guy, the shooter, was found unconscious and bleeding out in the stockroom, barely alive. The second one? He got away. They called it a robbery. A simple robbery. That's what the report said. But nothing about that night was simple. All those people I worked with. Alana, Mark, Greg, Rhonda. People I saw 5 days a week, shared dumb jokes with, split fries with, laughed with on smoke breaks. Gone. For money. Only 2 of us made it out. Me and Alana. She dropped when the shooting started, played dead the whole time. They didn't check. Thank God they didn't. Check. Sometimes I can't sleep. I still hear Marcus gasping for air. Still see Greg fall like a puppet with his strings cut. Still feel the pressure of that man's hand closing around my throat. But I survived. And that changes you. I don't take things for granted anymore. Not the cheap ice cream cone I get from 7-Eleven. Not the sound of traffic. Not the quiet walks. I take after midnight when the world's still and nothing moves, because now I know. Quiet means I'm still here. And that's enough. I never thought I'd leave the sticky warmth of Tampa for the cold, relentless buzz of New York City. But when my dad, Paul Hammond, found a rundown bakery tucked away in Brooklyn, just what he needed for his lifelong dream of owning a family business. We packed up everything and didn't look back. My dad's one of those people who never sit still. He's always been a hands-on guy, baking, fixing things, building whatever needed to be done. Back in Florida, we ran a small pastry shop in a town most people would have never heard of. The place had a steady stream of regulars, but it barely covered our bills. I graduated from Hillsborough Community College with a degree in business, hoping one day I'd help Dad grow his dream. And now that dream was beginning to take shape. The bakery we bought was odd. A squat red brick building crammed between a liquor store and a decrepit laundromat. It had a wide, dusty storefront window, still showcasing some peeling decals from the previous owner. Inside, the layout was simple. A small front area for customers and a kitchen in the back with shiny steel counters and a massive walk-in freezer. Behind the building was an alley with a service door so rusted I was half sure it'd fall off if you looked at it too hard. It didn't exactly scream dream business, but the price was suspiciously low. Compared to anything else in the area, it felt too good to pass up. So we dove in. Dad stayed behind in New York to oversee renovations, crashing on a cot in the back kitchen to save a little money on hotels. Mom and I stayed in Tampa to wrap things up. When the renovations were finally done, it looked different. Bright white walls, sleek counters, the smell of fresh bread wafting through the air. We finally made the move. The bakery, now named Maple and Rye, felt warm and inviting, nothing like the rundown building we'd started with. To our surprise, it was packed on opening day. The locals couldn't get enough of our lemon scones or my mom's apple cinnamon loaf. By the end of the first week, we were almost always sold out before closing time at 9 p.m. It felt like we were living in a dream. But with that success came new challenges. Custom cake orders, catering requests, early mornings, and late night baking sessions. Mom and Dad were both nearing 70, and as much as they loved the bakery, I could see how the pressure was wearing on them. That's when I hired Millie Carter, a second-year culinary student from Kingsborough Community College. She was smart, eager, and had a knack for picking up recipes and making them her own. She needed a late shift, 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., which worked perfectly. For the first few weeks, we worked side by side. She helped with prep, baking, and anything else we needed. She was funny, always cracking jokes, and I liked her energy. She had a way of taking my mom's old recipes and giving them a new, fresh twist that worked. But then, after 2 weeks, she didn't show up. No call, no text. At first, I thought maybe something came up, maybe school stress or a family emergency. But when she missed 2 more shifts without a word, I started to worry. I knew where she lived, just a few blocks from the bakery, so I decided to go by her place. Her building was old, worn out, with yellowed bricks and iron stair rails that creaked under your weight. I knocked on her door, and when she opened, she only cracked it open a few inches. Her eyes were wide, as if she'd just seen something terrible. "Hey, Millie, are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Before I could say anything more, she slammed the door. "Millie, please," I called through the thin wood. "What's going on? Just tell me what happened." There was a long pause. Then, slowly, the door opened, just a crack. Her face was pale, eyes bloodshot. "You weren't there that night," she said, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" "What night?" Her voice broke as she sat down on the edge of a faded couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at the floor. "The night you were sick." "I was alone in the kitchen," she whispered. "It started around midnight. I heard footsteps in the front shop. At first, I thought it was you coming in late, but there was no one there. Then, the footsteps got closer, louder. I thought someone had broken in." She stopped talking, shuddering as if just recalling the memory was enough to make her feel sick. It wasn't like normal footsteps. They were different, heavy, like someone dragging their feet. It didn't stop. It kept getting closer and closer until I felt like someone was standing right behind me. But when I turned around, no one was there. She paused, glancing up at me, her eyes wide and haunted. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave, but I was so scared. That's when I heard the whisper. I felt a chill run through me. A whisper? What did it say? Her lips trembled and she barely spoke above a whisper herself. It said, "Get out." I called out. No response. Then I saw it, a man's shadow in the kitchen doorway. But before I could say anything, there was a sudden sharp noise. A gunshot. It rang out loud and close, like it came from inside the walk-in freezer. I froze, my mind unable to process what I was hearing. Millie's eyes locked onto mine, wide with terror. Her face was pale, strained. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice trembled as she said, "Your bakery. It's not right. I can't go. Back there, please, don't ask me to." Before I could reply, the door slammed shut in my face. I stood there, feeling the weight of what she'd said. The air was thick with unspoken words, but it didn't matter. She was gone. Later that night, I found myself at the bakery, alone. We had some prep work for a Sunday morning delivery, and I figured I'd be in and out before midnight. The city outside was eerily still. The storefront flickered under the weak glow of a streetlight, casting strange shadows across the pavement. I unlocked the door, switched on the lights, and got to work in the kitchen, trying to shake off the heavy unease in my chest. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was imagining things. But at 12:40 a.m. I heard it. Footsteps. They weren't faint, distant sounds like I'd heard before. They were heavy, deliberate steps across the front of the shop. My heart stopped. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. Silence. Then, faint whispers. It wasn't clear, but it sounded like pleading, frantic murmurs, too soft to understand. My pulse quickened, and I reached for my phone, ready to call someone, anyone. But as I looked up, I saw it. Movement. Just at the corner of my eye. A shadow. Broad-shouldered, tall, standing in the kitchen doorway. Exactly where Millie had described it. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat, but the doorway was empty. Then, the gunshot. A deafening crack that ripped through the silence, echoing off the walls of the kitchen. I dropped to the floor, instinctively covering, my head heart racing. The oven timer beeped, oblivious to the chaos, and the noise seemed to amplify the emptiness in the room. When I finally stood up, everything was still. The bakery was empty. The alley door was locked tight. There were no signs of entry, but the feeling of being watched, being followed, was overwhelming, suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to finish the prep. I left everything behind and walked home, a heavy weight on my chest, the sounds of that night echoing in my head. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad had happened